The shock of hearing about children dying, or just innocent people in general dying, leaves us paralyzed with fear and uncertainty about how something like this could happen. It's extreme and unpredictable. It's actually the reason why there's people out there who refuse to have children. What if your child goes to school one day and then you get a call from the school about an active shooting, and the next thing you know, your child returns in a body bag? Why do school shootings
report
happen?
into a mass shooting at a school in Texas in May has found systemic failures in the response of law enforcement. 19 children and 2 teachers were killed.
Tears and hugs, an all too familiar scene in America after yet another school shooting.
He died saving his students. He died saving us. Without him, some kids wouldn't even be able to go hug their parents.
But despite Adam's issues, friends say Nancy Lanza took her son to local firing ranges and introduced him to the world of high-powered guns.
And everybody sends their thoughts and prayers again because that works so well. This is the 18th high school shooting in America this year, and we have 10 and a half months to go. We've had 290 since 2013. We average about 1 a week, but there's just nothing we can do.
For today's analysis, I want to examine 36 cases of school shootings/massacres, and I'm unsure how long this video will be, but I don't aim to do a deep dive on every single case. It's more about looking for what traits in these perpetrators repeat the most. I will have some categories on screen and make a tally mark for every time one of these cases lands in these categories. The structuring of this video will be pretty different from my previous true crime videos, since there's many layers to this type of crime and what causes or inspires someone to do it. I got a lot of my information from a site that has a timeline of school shootings in the US since the early 1900s. Some of the mass shootings I talk about in this video will be from the targeted category. I'm unsure what the method is for determining the difference between targeted and mass shooting, when a lot of the mass shootings were clearly targeted, and a lot of the targeted shootings weren't because the perpetrator was aiming for one person. So, I'll be covering both, and I've made sure to get a good variety for these shootings for the sake of not being accidentally one-sided or showing bias. These are only a sample size of the shootings I'll look at today, so my conclusions are less about 100% accuracy and more about having a solid, well-researched gist for the motive. Before starting, I want to acknowledge the potential criticism that this video is an info hazard. I want to counter that with saying that these shootings are going to happen regardless of what information or conclusions are put out there. What the media has done with this topic has, in my opinion, made this issue worse. I strive for understanding for the sake of prevention, and if we don't address the issue of school shootings, more will occur and more children will die. Let's begin.
A Lansing woman is the oldest person in Michigan and a survivor in more ways than one. Most notably, she survived the deadliest school massacre in U.S. history.
As strange as it seems, we're actually going to first start with a bombing. Andrew Kehoe was a 55-year-old farmer in Michigan. He previously worked as an electrician in St. Louis, Missouri, and had that job for many years until he accidentally fallen and hit his head, causing him to be in a coma for 2 weeks. He made his way back to Michigan and got married. Then he bought himself a farm outside of Bath Township. He's described as being a very smart man, but was very intolerant of anyone who would oppose his opinions. He was keen on keeping himself clean and would change his clothes throughout the day if they became even a little bit dirty, despite literally being a farmer. Speaking of which, people have said that he was abusive to his animals and even beat a horse to death. He tried to use machines to do all of the farm work for him, and when that didn't work, he would simply abandon the task. This led to him not being a very successful farmer. Even though he and his family were Catholic, he refused to go to church because he wanted to avoid paying his taxes, which were $400 at the time, but would be $7,700 in 2026. Fair enough. In 1924, he was elected to be the treasurer of the Bath Consolidated School Board, but he had his frustrations with the superintendent and accused him of financial mismanagement. In 1925, he was the Bath Township clerk, but lost his position in 1926 due to him losing an election. And this really pissed him off. In 1927, he had stopped working on his farm, and one of his neighbors had the thought that he might be planning on killing himself. His wife was sick with tuberculosis and was at the hospital often. The medical bills had Andrew unable to keep paying the mortgage for his farm. On May 18th, he killed his wife after she returned from the hospital on the 16th, and proceeded to blow up his own house and the farm. He was planting explosives in a new school building over the course of months and timed the explosions with the explosion of his own house and farm. He arrived at the school and blew himself up with the superintendent and his car. In total, 44 people died, including Andrew himself, and 58 were injured. Investigators went to his farm and noticed a sign that said criminals are made, not born. However, they also noticed that if he had just sold all of his farming equipment, it would have been enough to pay off the mortgage and get him out of financial trouble. This case is absolutely crazy, to say the least. This being the first documented case of a school massacre in America, and also being the case with the most killed, I'm shocked I haven't heard of it before. Now, there's a few things that stick out about this massacre. First, Andrew Kehoe clearly felt persecuted by the town, with him losing the election and the government about to foreclose his property. Second, he clearly has mental health issues, and it may have been exacerbated by the head injury he got when he was an electrician. Him beating a horse to death is a pretty major red flag. Third, he was showing signs of suicidal ideation when he had just stopped working on his farm and was withdrawing from people over the years. Fourth, it is obvious to say that the feeling of rage inspired his extreme actions. Fifth, his financial issues were the main cause of his life falling apart. He didn't realize there was a way out of the debt. He was motivated by taking vengeance against the town that not only didn't give him the job position he wanted, but also embarrassed him. With all that I've covered in this case, you can see how one thing after another came crashing down, and he couldn't see a way out, so he decided to take it out on everyone else. His perspective plays a key role in his own destruction, despite being known as a smart guy. You'll see this more often than you'd think throughout this video.
Mass murder in the capital city. Here is KTBC television news editor Neil Spells.
Good evening. One of history's worst mass murders occurred here in Austin today. By official count tonight, 49 persons were hit by gunfire. There are 16 dead and 33 injured.
This school shooting is one of, if not the first time, someone went in with the intention of shooting people at a school. Charles Whitman was a 25-year-old Marine veteran who reportedly had an IQ of 139. He grew up in a home where his father beat his mother often out of rage, and this abuse also trickled down to his children. Charles, when he was younger, had an interest in being a Boy Scout and was the youngest in the country to reach the rank of Eagle Scout. He also had become very good at playing the piano, but his father refused to let him play for school dances. After high school, Charles went into the Marine Corps and was stationed in Cuba for 18 months. While he was there, he got the Sharpshooter's Badge and the Marine Corps Expeditionary Medal. From his military service, he was able to get a scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin. He began his studies trying to get a degree in mechanical engineering in 1961. The following year, he married a woman he met at that same college named Kathleen Lessner. In 1963, he had to go back to the military and finish his enlistment, which he did in North Carolina. After finishing, he went back to Texas and switched to trying to do architectural engineering. His friends say he was very high-strung about school, more than someone would usually be, and when he got a C on an exam one time, he was distraught. He put a lot of pressure on himself to get good grades, and he would even try to get more credits even though he was already overwhelmed with his workload. He even turned to taking Dexedrine, often to help him stay awake during the night to study and work on school. He even said to a friend of his that he took them like popcorn. This drug is meant to be prescribed for people who struggle with ADHD, but he got the drug illegally. In 1966, his parents got divorced, which led to his father pestering him about trying to persuade his mother into getting back with him. His mom was tired of the way she was being treated and left for her own sake. Charles deeply hated his father and wanted to be nothing like him. His father was raised in an orphanage, so in life, he had only himself to rely on, which made him a very harsh father figure and partner. That same pressure his father felt to be put together as a person was passed down to Charles, and this emotional repression led to Charles, on 2 occasions, hitting his wife. He hated himself after he did that and felt conflicted on how to express himself. When he was struggling to finish a school project for a class, he and his teacher had a talk, and Charles displayed a lot of anxiety. He was overcome with emotions, and he saw a small piano in his teacher's home and started playing all of a sudden. He felt better afterwards, but his mental turmoil still went on until his wife urged him to see the school psychiatrist. He spoke with the psychiatrist for 1 2-hour session before leaving and never coming back to future sessions. Before he was going to follow through on his plan to commit a massacre, he wrote 2 suicide notes explaining how he's depressed, how he feels so much anger towards his father, and the stress of trying to not burden others too much with his own mental health issues, but also feeling alone due to not being able to express himself. For some time, he was experiencing strong headaches, and later on, during his autopsy, they discovered a tumor in his amygdala, but experts say that it wasn't the cause of his murderous desires. It's good to remember, though, that the amygdala is responsible for decision-making, emotional responses, and memory processing. Early in the morning of August 1st, 1966, he killed his wife and his mother. He wrote about how he saw life to be only full of suffering and how he didn't want his wife and his mother to feel the humiliation and pain of what he was about to do. He wrote about how much he loved them, and so in his eyes, he killed them out of mercy. Despite how much he hated his father, he didn't kill him. But it could be argued that he did this so that his father could live with the pain of what his son did. Later that morning, Charles goes to the bank and cashes some bad checks and goes to the gun store and buys himself some weapons to start to initiate the shooting. He also dressed himself up to look like school staff so no one would suspect anything. He gets into the tower that he has planned on using as a vantage point to start shooting at people and barricades himself inside. Before noon, he starts shooting at anyone he can point his gun at, and this ends in the police breaking through his barricade and killing him. The total number of people who died is 18, including Charles, and there were 31 injured. As I read about this case from the magazine you're seeing in this video, some of Charles' words before he went on a killing spree are worth thinking about. This is from a poem he wrote. "To maintain sensibility is the greatest effort required. To slip would be so easy. It would be accomplished with little effort. Yet to maintain is necessary in order to benefit from the future. Of what benefit? Will benefit be derived from the future? To burden others with your problems, are they problems, is not right. However, to carry them is akin to carrying a fused bomb. I wonder if the fuse can be doused. If it is doused, what will be gained? Will the gain be worth the effort put forth? But should one who considers himself strong surrender to enemies he considers so trivial and despicable?" I want to also read something he wrote in his will. "Donate the rest anonymously to a mental health foundation. Maybe research can prevent further tragedies of this type." I originally wanted this video to be more clinical regarding how people can be led into doing a school shooting, but reading these very words and the rest of his story has brought a great deal of sadness to me. Even when he hit his wife, he was disgusted with himself because he told himself he didn't want to be like his dad. However, emotional repression is exactly how he ended up hurting his wife despite not wanting to. The poem is striking to me. It talks about a very real struggle he and other people deal with emotionally. You have to control your emotions so you can have a good future that could help with those very emotions, but how long will it take to get there? Could a better position in life even help what you're feeling? Burdening others with your problems leaves others having to carry your weight along with their own. But to be the sole person carrying the weight of your emotions is like carrying a fused bomb. Could any good come from extinguishing how you feel inside? Could you hold on to hope long enough before you succumb to the dark thoughts? Charles even said to give his money away to a mental health foundation so more school shootings could be prevented. He said this 60 years ago. I think regarding Charles Whitman, two things can be true at once. He was a fucked up, murdering psycho, and he was also someone who deeply struggled with his mental health. He was clearly torn between wanting to express himself freely, like he did with wanting to play the piano and enjoying Boy Scout activities, but also feeling like he had high standards to live up to. There are no winners in this case, only a lesson we have yet to learn 60 years later. We see some similarities between Andrew Kehoe and Charles Whitman. Both struggled with mental illness, suicidal ideation, feelings of repressed rage, and feeling like the world they lived in was worthy of their wrath. Charles, however, had a traumatic childhood and even moved 8 times throughout. He also had a brain tumor, and even if the tumor wasn't the cause of the shooting, it played a part in harming his mental health by giving him severe headaches. He too was smart like Andrew, but still fell into senseless violence. As I continue, keep in mind that somehow, as a society, we have yet to figure out why people commit mass shootings. Robert Smith was an 18-year-old guy who was actually the first school shooting copycat killer who said he wanted to kill more than Charles Whitman. He was born in Houston, Missouri, and lived in Mesa, Arizona at the time he shot up Rosemar College of Beauty. Unfortunately, I can't get a lot more information about him as a person because I would have to pay to see newspaper articles written about him, and I'm not getting paid yet for making content on YouTube, so I can't do as much analysis as I'd like to since I don't know this guy very well. He killed 5 people in total, including a toddler, and surrendered to the police without a fight. He was laughing as he shot at the victims and was angered by one of them praying to God. He tried to suffocate them with sandwich bags, but obviously that shit's too small to fit over someone's head, so this guy doesn't exactly strike me as a genius or anything. He was infatuated with Napoleon, Julius Caesar, Adolf Hitler, and Lee Harvey Oswald. He had been having homicidal ideations since he was 13. A psychiatrist who had to see if he was fit to stand trial said that Robert saw himself as a god and believed he was justified in ruling over others. A doctor had said that Robert was completely indifferent towards what he had done, and according to Robert, he was picked on at school for being effeminate, and he felt no love for his parents. He did go to prison, but he was seen as mentally ill as well. He died April 21st, 2024, and I imagine it's from natural causes since nothing more is said about it. For this case, I can only go off of what little we know, so I would say him being picked on for being effeminate was likely part of why he targeted the beauty school. He likely struggled with interacting with women because he didn't perform a certain standard of masculinity, and that resentment probably started at 13, around the time he started idolizing men who had great power and killed many people. His disregard for his parents and God, seemingly, could definitely be seen as him having issues with authority figures and likely seeing them unfit for the position that they're in. Hence, why he feels as though he's justified in ruling over others because other authority figures in his life weren't suited for handling power. That's obviously a tie-in with why he was obsessed with kings and dictators. His motive for the shooting was indeed infamy, but I'd argue the other contributing factors is mental illness, him feeling vengeful against society, and him feeling some sort of resonance with the Charles Whitman case. I, too, would speculate he has ASPD, but I am only leaving that as a maybe for now. Neil Lebeskid was an 18-year-old man who performed very well in computer learning school and was an honor roll student who had been at the school since 1975. The school director said that Neil had a talent for data processing, and a former admissions representative said that Neil was self-conscious and presented himself to be a very capable person. His classmates said that he was a loner, but he was fighting with another student 2 weeks prior to the shooting. I wasn't able to find much more about Neil himself, so I'll just proceed to the day of the shooting. On February 19th, 1976, Neil took a sawed-off shotgun and shot and killed 1 person and injured 7 others. During the shooting, a witness said that Neil's face was expressionless. Luckily, police had caught up to Neil when he tried to flee by stealing a car, and he was arrested. I don't have information about what specifically made Neil not guilty by insanity, but that's what happened, and he was put into a mental hospital. This time, there's even less to go off of, but I'll attempt to see what he was motivated by. Him arguing a lot with a certain student does paint a picture that this was just meant to be for revenge, but I picked this case because he chose to shoot at 7 other people. He didn't even kill the guy he was mad at. I can only assume he wanted to take vengeance against his classmates as a whole. Him being put into a mental hospital is a clear indicator that he was struggling with mental health issues. That, combined with rage at his classmates, seems to be the reason why he did what he did. I wish we could know more about his life, but it is interesting that this guy was also considered to be really smart.
It's a summer morning in mid-July. The university where thousands of students attend is quiet. That's until 37-year-old Edward Alloway walks into the library's university carrying a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle.
Edward Alloway was a 37-year-old custodian that worked at California State University at Fullerton. Before the incident, he had a history of being violent and struggling with his mental health. He attempted to commit suicide and was hospitalized and was given shock therapy. He had also threatened his own wife with a knife and then proceeded to rape her. His motive for the shooting, he had delusions that pornographers were forcing his wife to partake in acting in porn movies, and his defense tried to say that the library staff members at the college would watch porn movies before starting work, but still, Edward's wife had nothing to do with it. They got divorced after he lashed out at her Memorial Day weekend. July 12, 1976, he bought a semi-automatic rifle and started shooting at the library staff before 7 a.m. He killed 7 people and injured 2. He actually spared a couple witnesses, stating that they don't belong here. He runs off after the shooting and goes into a hotel. He uses their phone to confess to the crime he just committed and gives himself up freely. He gets diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and gets put into a mental hospital. The judge finds him not guilty by reason of insanity. Throughout the years after he's put into a mental hospital, the staff there try to say that he no longer has symptoms of his mental illness, but a district attorney contacted the governor at the time and advocated for Edward to not be released, and to this day, he's still in a mental hospital. With later cases, we'll be able to get more information about these perpetrators. Again, I'll just try to do my best to understand the motive. So we can see here that this is about vengeance again, but it's mostly fueled by his mental illness. He did display suicidal tendencies, but it's interesting that he didn't try to kill himself after the shooting. However, he ran out of bullets during it, so that could be the reason why he just chose to give himself up instead of taking the easy way out. His act of violence was definitely rage-induced because he thought his wife was getting taken advantage of, but he was literally the one taking advantage of her. I could only assume that his paranoid schizophrenia had twisted his own desires and projected them onto his co-workers. For this case, it's not a typical school shooting since he mainly targeted his co-workers and was also working at the school, but I figured it was worth noting for the more extreme mental illness aspect.
Are there any kids hurt?
The shooting began around 8:30 a.m. A sniper was firing random shots at school children on their way to class at Cleveland Elementary.
Brenda Spencer was a 17-year-old girl who had a very troubled home life. Her parents got divorced when she was 10 because her mother found out her father was cheating on her. She was made to live with her father, and they slept on the same mattress in the living room. The home was littered with beer bottles. Brenda goes on to claim her mother neglected her and her father physically and sexually abused her. I mean, based on the fact that he was an alcoholic who laid on the same bed as his daughter, who the hell thinks something isn't wrong with that? Of course, her parents denied the allegations, but after the shooting when Brenda was in prison, one of her cellmates, who was 17 years old, was released, and she had previously met Brenda's father beforehand, and they ended up getting married and living together. There's no doubt in my mind that that man is a child groomer and an abuser, and I'm not even gonna say allegedly. People who knew Brenda said she often spoke negatively about police officers and expressed an interest in shooting one. She also aspired to do something big to get on television. She referred to herself as a radical, and the way she spoke ill of police officers had made her classmates uncomfortable and scared of her. She didn't care for school much, and she skipped school. One of the staff had told the parents that she was suicidal, so at some point, she must have spoken or acted in a way for that to get reported. The summer of 1978, she broke into the Grove Cleveland Elementary School and shot birds out the window with her BB gun. She got in trouble for this and was put on probation. Her probation officer did psychiatric evaluation on her and recommended to her parents that she be put into a mental hospital for depression. That Christmas, Brenda's father gives her a semi-automatic rifle with 500 rounds of ammo. Brenda believes he did this so she would kill herself. I, too, believe this based on how obvious it is her father was abusive towards her. On January 29, 1979, Brenda started shooting at Grove Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego. from the window of her house. She shot at children, staff members, and a police officer. She killed 2 staff members and injured 8 children and a police officer. She picked up a call from a reporter who was trying to get details about what was going on, and she reportedly claimed the shooting was because she didn't like Mondays. She told police negotiators that the people she shot at were easy targets and she wasn't going to stop shooting. This was until she was promised a Burger King meal, and then she came out and surrendered. She was charged as an adult and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The way the media and YouTubers have portrayed this case makes me unhappy. First off, the media in general misrepresents Brenda by claiming that she was the first school shooter. If they don't say that, they say that she was the first modern, high-profile case of a school shooting, which, in my opinion, is glorifying the hell out of what she did. I've already shown you she's not the first school shooter. Brenda says later in her life, "Oh geez, what if I inspire more school shootings?" Which I believe isn't said because she has genuine concern, but more so to keep up with the infamy she has. She literally did this for infamy. She said the "I don't like Mondays" shtick to create a headline, not because that was really her motive. I think she's truthful about her father being abusive towards her, and her not mentioning it before the shootings isn't proof alone she's lying. She stated that her mom was neglectful. That could easily create a perception in a 17-year-old's mind that she can't trust the people who are supposed to help her, which could also explain her hatred for the police. Yes, it could very well be political, but there's an emotional aspect to it. Her parents failed her beyond belief. Even if you disagree about her father being abusive, you know damn well giving a mentally ill suicidal teenager a fucking semi-automatic gun is extremely inappropriate and a very big sign of neglect. You can likely already see what factors led to this happening. She won in infamy. She was suicidal. She was mentally ill. And she was heavily traumatized by her shitty parents. You start to see as I go on that these cases become less, "Oh, how could this have happened?" and more like, "Why didn't this happen sooner?" In all of the cases after this one, I haven't seen a single shooter mention Brenda as an inspiration for what they did. Even the cases I don't cover in this video, to my knowledge, I haven't seen anyone talk about Brenda other than YouTubers. I'm pressing on this particular media portrayal so much because, if anything, this is actually the first time a shooter in the media was sensationalized.
The students that were inside Oakland Elementary that day are adults now. The school's name has been changed. Still, survivors say September 26, 1988 changed their lives forever.
James Wilson Jr. was a 19-year-old man who lived with his grandmother. He was unemployed and had a major history of mental health issues. From 14, he was in and out of the psychiatric hospitals. He was given Xanax for his anxiety and depression. He wasn't able to continue getting treated at the hospital because his family's insurance couldn't pay for it anymore. He abused his prescription and took all of the Xanax within 10 days when it was meant to last for months. The family would have multiple incidents with James, but they only called the police the first time he was having an outburst. He was obsessed with the movie Psycho and watched it hundreds of times. He was also obsessed with mass murderers and made a lot of violent jokes to his family, which unsettled them. On September 26, 1988, James stole his grandmother's revolver and went to the store and purchased ammo. He drove to Oakland Elementary School, went into the cafeteria, and started shooting at both kids and adults. A witness says he had a look of rage on his face. After he ran out of ammo, he dropped the gun and left the school building with everyone else running out. He was identified and arrested, and he was sentenced to death by electric chair. He killed 2 8-year-old children and injured 9 others, including adults. I mean, this case felt inevitable. He was mentally ill, terrorized his family, was obsessed with mass murderers, and abused benzos. This feels pretty clear-cut to me, and maybe I'd also throw in infamy because of him targeting an elementary school specifically. He shot kids and adults, so who his victims were as random as the other cases. I don't feel the need to really examine this guy because this case kind of just explains itself.
Witnesses say a lone gunman walked onto the campus at Stockton's Cleveland Elementary School and opened fire with a machine gun.
Patrick Purdy was a 24-year-old man who was born in Tacoma, Washington. His parents divorced when he was 2 years old because his father had threatened to kill his mother with a gun. His mother had moved him and his siblings to California and settled down in Stockton. She remarried in 1968, and she spent much of her time drinking alcohol. Her new husband was physically violent towards her in front of the children, and in 1973, they ended up getting divorced. She moved her and her kids to Sacramento, but neighbors had reported her for physically abusing and neglecting her children. However, the charges against her for child abuse were dropped when she agreed to take a counseling program. When Patrick was 13, he hit his mom during an argument with her, and she kicked him out of the house. He lived on the streets of San Francisco, and to survive, he unfortunately resorted to prostitution. He was put in foster care soon enough, and his father got custody of him. In 1979, he began high school, but he was seen as a lazy student, an outcast, and just an overall loner. He skipped school often to drink alcohol and do drugs. He conjured up a criminal record full of drug dealing and robbing people. His father had wanted him to go to rehab, and even though Patrick did it, it wasn't very effective. A counselor stated that Patrick's behavior indicated that he needed a father figure to restrain him, and if he didn't get better, he would develop a sociopathic character that would be untreatable. In 1981, his father died in a car accident, and he left $5,000 in the will. However, his mother takes that money and buys a new car and takes a trip to New York City. This made Patrick resent his mother even more. He was made homeless again and took odd jobs and stole to support himself. Luckily, he's put into foster care and stays with this woman until he's 18. After he's an adult, he runs into a lot of legal trouble because he's just engaging in so much crime. While he's in jail for unlawful use of a firearm and assaulting a police officer, he tries to kill himself. He was also taken to a psychiatric hospital, and it was determined that he was a threat to himself and others. He's also diagnosed with having a mild mental retardation or impairment, and I don't have details as to what that really means. What they're referring to is having intellectual disability, but as to which one that it is, I mean, it was a long time ago. They probably don't even know. In 1987, Patrick started going to college and taking welding courses, but complained about how many Asians were present and said that they were taking jobs away from Americans. He moved to many states in search of a job, but even when he did get a job, he had the tendency of arguing with the supervisors, which led him to quitting or getting fired soon after getting hired. His friends say that he often dealt with suicidal ideation and was angry about his life had panned out, feeling as though his circumstances were unfair and he struggled to cope with it. Fair enough! Months before he committed the shooting, he was buying guns and still struggled with employment. On January 17, 1989, Patrick entered the playground of Cleveland Elementary School with a semi-automatic rifle and started shooting at children. A teacher who survived the attack said that Patrick showed no emotion on his face and just seemed focused. Before the police arrived, Patrick takes his handgun and kills himself. In total, he shot and killed 5 children and 31 injured, including teachers. Surprisingly, during his autopsy, there was no traces of drugs or alcohol in his system. All they found was caffeine. His rifle stock had things like freedom and victory written on it. Even though he didn't have a suicide note, it was clear to the investigators that he wanted to be remembered since he wasn't able to make something of himself in life and he was about to end it anyways. The traits we see in this case is mental illness, suicidal ideation, infamy, him feeling like everything that has happened in his life wasn't fair, which led to him taking vengeance against society, and there does seem to be an element of xenophobia and him likely being upset by being surrounded by Asian folk who were higher achieving than he was. For that, I'll note an extreme ideology. Despite him not looking mad while he was committing the shooting, he very much had shown rage at the prospect of his life and wanted to take it out on other people. I wanted to add substance abuse as another factor in why he did what he did, but it seems that he was actually clean at the time he committed the shooting. But he was still very much affected by the trauma he went through when he was a kid, and you can't expect anything good to come of his circumstances, especially in the 70s and 80s. Later on, a lack of mental health resources stops becoming an excuse.
In this room, I came out to this area here when I saw him, and I yelled 911, man with a gun, shots fired.
Robert Ledford remembers the gunman, Eric Houston, a high school dropout who stormed onto campus with a .22 caliber rifle and a shotgun.
Eric Houston was a 20-year-old man who used to attend Linstert High School. We aren't given too much information about his history, but he claimed he did it because he had just lost his job, and his failing to graduate high school made him very angry at his old civics teacher for not letting him pass the class. He claims he wasn't in touch with reality at the time, but regardless, he's sentenced to death row, where he still is now. California hasn't executed anyone in a long time, so he'll likely just die in prison. On May 1st, 1992, Eric walks into his old civics class with a shotgun and a rifle and shoots the teacher who didn't pass him. He proceeds to shoot at the students and gets into an 8-hour standoff with the police before he surrenders. I would say he was motivated by having financial issues and wanting to take vengeance against the civics teacher and the school for not letting him get his GED. He felt his life was ruined by them, so he decided to ruin their lives. But I would speculate that he has mental health issues. Then again, he might have just said he wasn't in touch with reality to get a better sentencing or to go to a mental health facility. People don't realize that going to a place like that when you're sane is actually torture because you're surrounded by people who are genuinely insane.
One took place in December of 1992 right here in the Capital Region. Josh Einiger, chief of our Berkshire County newsroom, recently interviewed the student who pulled the trigger and is now serving a life sentence.
Wayne Lowe was an 18-year-old man who was born in Taiwan. His parents relocated to the United States in 1981, where they lived in Maryland. They lived there for 2 years until they went back to Taiwan, and then they returned to the U.S. 4 years later in Montana. Wayne attended high school here and did well with playing the violin and got a GPA of 3.56. In 1991, Wayne was accepted by Simon's Rock College of Bard with a minority scholarship, but he wanted to go to a boarding school so he could no longer see his father. While at college, his peers heard him express a lot of racist, fascist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic beliefs. Before the shooting, he had tried to mail himself a gun, which led the school to try to investigate him in his dorm, but they reportedly didn't find anything. Other students had allegedly made complaints about him stockpiling ammo in his room, but the school didn't follow through with looking into the matter. There was an anonymous call made that same night claiming that Wayne was going to shoot people, but the police were never notified, and the school never found the ammo Wayne hid in his room. On December 14, 1992, Wayne went and bought a semi-automatic rifle from a sporting goods store and proceeded to go to his college to start the shooting. He uses his car and starts shooting people out of his car window. He stops and walks around, trying to still shoot people until he walks inside the college and calls the police about what he just did. They show up and he surrenders. In total, 2 people were killed and 4 were injured. He gets evaluated and he's diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but a court psychiatrist simply thinks that he has narcissistic personality disorder. He tries for the insanity plea, but he ends up getting 2 life sentences. He waived his right to a resentencing because, according to him, he thought his sentence was fair for the horrible crime that he committed. Years later, when he was interviewed about the Virginia Tech shooting, he said that it was too easy to buy himself a gun, and if he had a 2-week waiting period, he might have never committed the shooting at all. He does seem remorseful, based on what I've seen, and apparently the claims about him being racist were hard to verify, but I do think it's strange he never really commented on his other extreme beliefs, but that could be explained by his schizophrenia. Undiagnosed schizophrenics have a pretty strong tendency to lean towards extreme beliefs, even if it doesn't make sense for who they are. For this case, I can only speculate as to what goes on in the mind of someone with paranoid schizophrenia, but that paranoid aspect makes me believe that he felt he needed to take vengeance against his peers. I'm debating on adding extreme ideology to this because it seems to be because of his mental illness and not exactly because it reflects his true belief system. So, I won't add it, especially since he was never charged with his attack being a hate crime. His home life isn't spoken about that much, but it's possible his father was harsh and put a lot of pressure on him since Wayne wanted nothing to do with his father. Also, the fact that his family moved quite a bit in his childhood likely made him feel a sense of instability and a lack of belonging. I don't see any aspect of rage in this case, so I won't include it. You'll see that it's not always anger that factors into this act of violence. I feel rage would have made more sense if he had tried to kill his father or made any statements relating to that.
Nearly 24 hours after cracks of gunfire silenced the morning buzz at Pearl High School, Luke Woodham stepped into the sunlight for the first time since being arrested.
Luke Woodham was a 16-year-old who lived with his mother, but she was often either working or out socializing, so he was left home alone a lot. His parents got divorced when he was in 6th grade, and Luke states that he had been depressed since he was 8. Not only he felt lonely though, he felt as if his mother didn't love him, and he expressed this to his classmates. He was bullied for being seen as weird and overweight. He was able to get a girlfriend, but this didn't last long since he was very possessive over her, and his mother became overbearing and wanting to watch over them like a guard during their dates. His girlfriend breaks up with him, and this leaves him feeling suicidal, even putting a gun in his mouth, up until he met Grant Boyette. Grant initiates him into a friend group called the Croth. Grant was the leader of this group and often intimidated other members by using physical violence. He had an affinity for Adolf Hitler because of how he was able to influence people, and Friedrich Nietzsche because of his nihilistic outlook on life. Luke was brought into all of this just looking to make friends, and he saw this as something good happening to him after the breakup. Grant eventually tells Luke he's a Satanist, and Luke told him about someone bullying him at school. Grant cast a spell on that person, but Luke was thinking of someone else, and this led to that person dying by being hit by a car. This was very likely a coincidence, but to Luke, this was proof that Grant could kill people and Satanism was real. The Croft gets enamored by the idea of having a first kill, and this leads to Luke and Grant torturing and killing Luke's dog, Sparkles. They laughed at how her howls of pain sounded human. In the summer of 1997, the Croft planned on terrorizing the school and having Luke shoot it up. They also planned on going to Mexico and going to Cuba afterwards to escape the consequences. Some members claimed that none of that was real, but some others were still arrested for conspiracy to commit a murder after the shooting. Luke writes in his manifesto, "Wednesday 1st, 1997 shall go down in history as the day I fought back." He told a friend beforehand he's going to kill his mother, but this friend was under the impression he wouldn't really do that. On October 1st, 1997, Luke stabs his mother to death early in the morning and puts a pillow over her face, and an investigator says it's common for murderers to do this when they feel remorse. Luke writes up his manifesto and heads to school with a gun. He gave one of the Croft members the manifesto and walked away. An excerpt of the manifesto says, "I am not insane, I am angry. This world has shit on me for the final time. I killed because people like me are mistreated every day. I did this to show society, push us, and we will push back." He goes in and starts shooting people in the cafeteria. Luke finds his ex-girlfriend and shoots her to death. He starts shooting at other people and shoots a guy he thought was the mayor's son for shock factor. After he is done shooting at people, he leaves and tries to escape using his mom's car. The assistant principal gets his own gun and orders Luke to stop. He's able to detain him until the police arrive. 6 members of the Croft were also arrested for conspiracy to murder, and Luke got life in prison on top of 140 years. So, there's a lot to pick apart. He very much had mental health issues. Despite not killing himself, he dealt with suicidal ideation. He was incredibly vengeful towards his classmates. His home life with neglectful parents is definitely traumatizing, and before anyone objects to that, he said himself that his mom told him, "You wouldn't amount to anything, and you are fat and stupid and lazy."
Why'd you stay with mom? She never loved me. She just picked on you a little bit. Always. She always told me I wouldn't amount to anything. She always told me I was fat and stupid and lazy. Wasn't good enough. Wasn't good enough.
He definitely felt rage towards the people he felt abandoned him in his life. And I would say he participated in extreme ideology. He fell in line with the Croft's brand of Satanism and literally tortured his own dog to death. Grant definitely had a lot of influence over Luke because of how lonely and directionless Luke was. That's usually how it goes when people get indoctrinated. I don't want to have too much leeway for Luke though, because nothing should ever convince you to hurt your own dog or to shoot and kill people. The passage about madmen from Nietzsche shows how Luke likely fell in with Satanism because he felt like God left him behind or God was dead, and there would be no hope of having a good life. This is abandonment issues and issues with authority mixing in together. He tried the insanity plea in court, but that didn't pan out for him. I would say he was likely just depressed and suicidal and not really dealing with any mental illnesses relating to him losing grasp on reality.
3 students are dead, 5 others hit by bullets, and now McCracken County parents are pleading with educators and authorities to do something to avoid another massacre in the future.
Michael Carnio was a 14-year-old boy who was bullied at school, with people calling him gay, and he was under the impression his parents didn't love him. He suffered from depression, anxiety, and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after the shooting. Before the incident, he had multiple instances of stealing guns and ammo from his father and his neighbors. He told his classmates something big will happen on Monday, but this was brushed off. He was found with a copy of Rage by Stephen King after the shooting, and this prompted Stephen to stop printing the book. However, there were 4 shootings that were connected to the book in some way, so as to why he took action this time hasn't been commented on to my knowledge. And he did know of at least another shooting beforehand that had the perpetrator be a reader of the book. Though, this isn't me saying the book caused anyone to die. I'll go more into the book and its contents later into this video because there's an important conversation to be had about resonance. On December 1st, 1997, Michael put a handgun into his backpack, and when he arrived at school, he put on the earplugs and began shooting at some students during a prayer group. When the principal came to see what was going on, Michael had dropped his gun and pleaded with the principal to kill him because he couldn't believe he did that. In total, he shot and killed 3 students and injured 6 more. He told the police he didn't know why he did it, but what I stated before was the driving force behind this crime. He got a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years, but his parole hearing in 2022, he wasn't granted it, and he's going to sit in prison for the rest of his life now. He was deemed mentally ill, but was still found guilty, and his attempts at a retrial for an insanity plea have been hopeless. His case, along with others, are starting to feel a bit typical. He was mentally ill, wanted vengeance, showed some suicidal ideation, though it was only when he was confronted with what he did. And I'd say he felt a lot of anger against his classmates and his life as a whole. He may have resonated quite a bit with rage.
26 years ago today, 2 armed students pulled a fire alarm at Westside School Middle School, then opened fire on their classmates as they exited the building with their teachers.
Mitchell Johnson, 13 years old, and Andrew Golden, 11 years old, were both perpetrators in the Westside Middle School shooting. Mitchell's parents divorced when he was 7, and his mother remarried. He had a good relationship with his stepfather and brother. He seemed nice and respectful on the outside, but when he was around 6, he was sexually abused by a family member who worked at the daycare he was taken to often. The trauma of this led to him having a lot of repressed feelings of rage, and sadly, when he was 12, he molested a 3-year-old girl, but the charges were dropped against him because he was a young minor. Child-on-child sexual assault is a very nuanced discussion, and because Mitchell went on to shoot up a school, I believe he should have gotten much more serious consequences or maybe institutionalized. Mitchell's father did try to get him help for what he had done to the little girl, but we wouldn't be here today if that's where the story ended. He started wanting to present himself like he was a gangster and made claims of killing animals. He went as far as to instigate fights with other people as a way of proving himself. I'm going to start talking about Andrew Golden now, because their stories start merging sometime before the shooting. Andrew had a stable home life, though his grandparents did most of the child rearing. Because his parents worked long hours at the post office, his family had introduced him to shooting guns at the age of 6 by giving him guns more fit for his age and slowly going from BB guns to pistols. Mitchell and Andrew had become casual friends on the bus and would bully other students together. Mitchell in particular would make a lot of threats about killing his classmates and wanted to kill a 6th grade girl named Candace Porter. He said that they had dated, but she broke up with him. However, it's disputed whether or not they actually dated, and it might be another false claim, like the one he makes about being gang affiliated. It says on the Wikipedia article that Andrew apparently displayed troublesome behavior at school and got into fights with other people. Someone accused him of killing their cat with his BB gun. I'm unsure how to feel because I don't see a source talking about this, so let's just leave it in the air. Andrew was reported for making threats about shooting people at the school, but he told the counselor that he had just had a nightmare about shooting up the school, and this scared him out of his plan. So, no further action was taken regarding this matter. On March 24, 1998, Mitchell and Andrew steal guns from Andrew's family, steal a van from Mitchell's family, and proceed to go shoot up the school. Andrew set off the fire alarm, and he and Mitchell ran out to the woods and started shooting at anyone who came out. In total, they killed 5 people, including 1 teacher, and injured 10 others, including 1 other teacher. They tried to flee in the van they brought earlier and planned on running away, but they were caught by the police. In trial, Mitchell read an apology letter, and he and Andrew couldn't be given a harsh sentence due to their ages. So, instead, they were put in prison until they turned 21 years old. This case feels a little strange for me on Andrew's side of things, because there doesn't seem to be much of a reason why he would just go along with Mitchell's plan. Though, it's good to keep in mind he was 11 years old at the time of the shooting, and likely was seeking Mitchell's approval. If he really was engaging in violent behavior as well, the best I can say with what information we have is that this was due to Mitchell's influence. Andrew doesn't seem to have much of an intrinsic reason for shooting and killing people. This goes outside of the categories I have so far, so I'll just say manipulated? For Mitchell, it seems a lot more clear-cut. He suffered trauma when he was younger, and this affected him to the point of sexually abusing a younger child. Rage for what had happened and vengeance against his supposed ex-girlfriend led to him being unable to cope with his issues and then killing people. Neither of them seemed to be suicidal, but maybe I could make a case for Mitchell being mentally ill, even though there hasn't been any mention of that. Still, we see some familiar components here for what led to a school shooting.
Tragic situation at Thurston High School this morning.
A boy armed went into the cafeteria 8 o'clock this morning.
Go ahead and start sending them out. I'll get the medic out there.
If it was your daughter, you would. You'd be here. You'd be worried. Linda!
Kipling Kinkwell was a 15-year-old guy who deeply struggled with his mental health. His family had a history of this, but neglected to bring it up to Kipling's psychologist. His court-ordered psychologist had found out that his uncle stabbed a cop because he thought the cop killed his brother in World War II. Kipling had been dealing with schizophrenia since he was 12, but refused to tell anyone, fearing the stigma and being sent to a psychiatric hospital. In his younger years, starting school, he struggled with dyslexia, but that wasn't known or diagnosed until much later. He had developed a strong interest for bombs and firearms, and though his parents were wary at first, his father tried to embrace it in a poor attempt to connect with his son and have a better relationship with him. He had anger issues though, and his parents tried to have a psychologist help him, and this led to Kipling being prescribed Prozac for his depression. This was working well for him, and he was improving mentally quite a bit until his parents cut him from the treatment because he was doing better, not realizing that the treatment didn't cure him of his issues. A major incident that pushed all of this further into the point of no return was when Kipling tried to buy a gun from a friend of his, but it was a stolen gun. So, Kipling ended up getting in trouble for being in possession of a stolen weapon and was arrested along with his friend. He was facing the possibility of being expelled, and when his father picked him up from the police station, he said he put Kipling into military school if he didn't act better. He felt his life was collapsing in on him and felt he had to spare his parents the embarrassment of what he had done. The day before the shooting, he shot and killed his parents in a twisted attempt at being merciful. On May 21st, 1998, Kipling took his mother's car and drove it to Thurston High School and proceeded to start shooting students in the cafeteria. When he went to reload his rifle, one of the students he shot at, Jacob Riker, tackled him, and fellow students did the same. They were able to disarm him, and he pleaded with them to just kill him. The police arrive and arrest him. While he's in the interrogation room, he takes a knife he had hidden on his leg and tried to attack the cop, hoping he'll be shot to death. Instead, the cop subdues him with pepper spray. In total, he killed 4 people, including his parents, and injured 25. He tried to kill himself again by starvation, but his sister came to see him in prison, and this stopped him from trying again. His sister acknowledges that what he did was horrible, but he was also struggling with no proper help from his parents. He's sentenced to 111 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Any appeals have been rejected so far since he pled guilty to murder, and doing that prevents someone from pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. This case seems to garner a lot of sympathy from people due to Kipling not getting the help he clearly needed. He was a young kid dealing with harsh mental conditions, trying to navigate a world not ready to address mental health issues. What we see in this case is mental illness, suicidal ideation, feeling like he couldn't be honest about his issues without being ostracized, and I'm reluctant to add rage because it seems that it comes more from the voices in his head more than anything. I always have some inclination towards being a little more lenient when it comes to paranoid schizophrenia because that sort of issue undiagnosed is a nightmare for everyone involved, and it's hard to help someone with that issue because they have to be seen as a threat to themselves and others, but as we can see, that doesn't happen until it's too late. I do hope there's some sort of reform in the future where you don't need to be seen as immediately dangerous to get a diagnosis and get treatment for it.
It was supposed to be just another school day at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. What happened there on April 20th, 1999, however, has gone down in history as one of the nation's worst criminal acts.
I'm going to try my best with reducing the time we spent on this case because we're going to touch on certain elements of it later in the video, since this is the most referred to case when it comes to copycat shootings. Eric Harris was born in Kansas, but due to his father being in the Air Force, they moved 5 times before settling down. In middle school, before Eric's family settled in Colorado after his father retired, Eric seemed to be a normal kid who was in Little League Baseball and had a decent social life. This was in New York, and later on, Eric talks about how he felt uprooted from his friends and most of his memories from being there. In the basement tapes, he's seen crying when he starts talking about it when he's alone in his car. He was angry at his father for making him restart over and over again at the bottom of the ladder, socially speaking. This led to him feeling isolated and upset. When he was in middle school in Colorado now, he had to get 2 major surgeries related to his birth defects that caused his chest to be inverted basically. I can imagine that having a physical disability to begin with, and now having to get surgery to fix it in a place completely new to you, would cause a kid to feel very overwhelmed. Dylan Klebold was born in Colorado, and his mother said that she had a brief awful feeling during his birth that he would go on to bring her great sorrow. He was born with a condition that would lead him to vomit a lot in the first few months of his life, but other than that, his early life was normal. He was a Boy Scout and loved to play baseball, though in the basement tapes, he talked about how his athletic and popular older brother bullied him, and how his extended family treated him like the runt of the litter. He also spoke about hating the snobby kids in his daycare years ago because he felt they disliked him. Eric and Dylan formed a close bond from the end of middle school to the beginning of high school. They went out and did many activities together, including playing video games. Sue Klebold's perspective of this friendship varies from Judy Brown's perspective of this friendship, the mom of one of Eric's and Dylan's friends. Judy says that Eric was more dependent on Dylan because Dylan had a better reputation at school. Meanwhile, Sue believes that Dylan's self-destructiveness and Eric's overwhelming rage fed into each other's darkness and created a toxic bond between them. Eric was seen as likable by others, and he was a part of Columbine's soccer team for 2 years. In early 1997 sophomore year, Eric and Dylan and some of their friends were involved in a lot of mischievous activities, including setting off explosives and drinking alcohol. Eric called these escapades rebel missions, and online, his alias was Reb, a shortened version of the word rebel. He caught the police's attention after some reports of vandalism in the neighborhood. February 1997, Brooks Brown was friends with the duo until he and Eric got into an argument and Eric smashed his windshield with a chunk of ice. Brooks decides to tell Eric's parents about his drinking habits and force him to apologize for the damage done to his car. This pissed Eric off to the point of him writing death threats online relating to Brooks. In August, someone anonymously reported this, and Brooks' parents were made aware of this. They were torn about what to do, and this was made worse when in March 1998, Eric had been posting instructions online for how to build bombs. His parents reported this to the police, and one of the officers wrote up a search warrant in April that same year, but never submitted it to the judge for it to be recognized. Back in January, though, Eric and Dylan weren't focused on Brooks, and instead, they broke into a van that was parked inside of a park and attempted to steal electronic devices. An officer who was on patrol at the park spotted them and questioned them, and they ultimately confessed to what they did. Eric's statement about how it went down is interesting to note. He claimed that it was Dylan's idea to steal from the van, while in Dylan's retelling, he made no mention of either of them having the idea first. They were both made to finish a diversion program, which led to them having to take anger management classes and get psychiatric help, which led to Eric starting to take Zoloft. They finished in March and had to complete a form about their behavioral issues. Eric checked off a lot of boxes you see on screen, but Dylan only checked off a couple boxes relating to finances and work instead of his mental health issues. As you can see, junior year, these two changed in a way that was noticeable to their peers. Eric wasn't on the soccer team anymore, and he was seen as more angry and threatened others often. He also started dressing in darker clothes. Dylan began to change junior year too, also being angry and lashing out at people. After they got past the van incident in 1998, this was when Eric and Dylan started planning the shooting. Eric wrote about how he was inspired by the Oklahoma City bombing that happened 3 years prior and wanted to surpass the amount of people who died. Dylan wrote about how he and Eric were above other people, godlike, but also wrote about his depression and him wanting to kill himself. In December, they made a video for a school project with them acting as hitmen for hire, where they go around and kill students as a way to protect the weaker students from the bullies. The two of them wrote papers in school about their violent fixations, and as you can guess, not much was done about it ultimately. Dylan's parents were aware of one of the papers, but he claimed it was just a story, and so it was dropped. Leading up to the shooting, Eric and Dylan obtained guns and created bombs in Eric's garage. There's a couple things I want to clear up before continuing. First, they were never a part of the trench coat mafia group at their school, and were only friends with some of the members. Second, they were not Nazis. Eric was fascinated with the idea of natural selection and had said a lot of hateful things, but neither him or Dylan actually fell in line with that ideology. They were more nihilistic than anything else. I actually was under the impression they were neo-Nazis until I got to this part of the video, and it's unfortunate to see how quick the media was to throw a bunch of labels and accusations on these two without any evidence. Third, I do believe they were bullied at Columbine. Yes, there's some people who say it wasn't the leading reason why they shut up the school, but I see it as a part of the reason. To fully deny that there was any bullying happening at a high school in the fucking 90s? That's delusional. There was an incident that these two were having jocks throw ketchup-covered tampons at them while calling them faggots. There was another incident where someone threw a cup of fecal matter at them. I'm unsure about the details about that story, but it's pretty wild regardless. Alright, let's get back to it. On the surface, Dylan being accepted into some computer schools and Eric trying to join the Marines, he was rejected because he was taking Zoloft, led to others to believe that they were planning for the future and were looking forward to it. But the happiness Eric and Dylan had towards the end was a warning sign. On April 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan didn't show up to their bowling class and arrived at Columbine High School with duffel bags around 11 a.m. They plant the bombs in the cafeteria and briefly go home to record the final basement tape. Afterwards, they return, and Eric runs into Brooks and tells him to go home. He does, and minutes later, Eric and Dylan are shooting people inside, and he calls the police with a neighbor's phone. Fortunately, the bombs they planted didn't go off, but they continued their plan anyway, shooting at people in the cafeteria, the hallways, and the library. All the statements they made about trying to kill as many people as they can were in vain, as they had the means to kill several more people, but chose not to. They walked around and taunted people, but it's actually debated if they asked one of them if they believed in God before shooting them. The story isn't clear, and there's conflicting accounts. Anyways, they end up killing not a single jock, and it seemed more like the people they killed were random and not really targeted. But an argument I could make is that they spared the jocks to make them live with the trauma of the whole incident. Around noon, they killed themselves in the science classroom. In total, they shot and killed 14 people and injured 23. The police haven't dealt with anything like this before and moved in to help people after everything stopped. There's a lot going on in this case that warrants some discussion, but I'm going to be analyzing it more at length later in the video because of how often they've been mentioned in other school shootings after this one. The FBI says that Eric was a psychopath, but now that we've properly gone over the case, you can see that Eric himself had to try to stay away from his family in order to feel as little remorse as possible. I'm not inclined in any way to take the FBI's word for it. We have seen evidence of the opposite. We know why he was so upset. They didn't want to release the rest of the basement tapes in order to curb copycat attacks. But first of all, that didn't help at all. And second of all, I'm not actually convinced the motive for destroying the basement tapes was fully for the greater good. You've likely noticed that I haven't said a word about what Eric's parents feel about the whole situation. All we have are the Klebold's having the courage to talk openly about where they fell short and the remorse they feel for what happened. I didn't see any police interviews for the Harrises back in 1999, so I'm thinking they were reluctant to talk about Eric even back then. I'm not sitting here throwing around conspiracy theories or anything. These are just strange things I've simply observed. For the factors at play in this case: suicidal ideation, mental illness, wanting to take vengeance against society, infamy, rage, and I'm adding trauma on Eric's side because him not being able to have emotional attachments to people for long before he and his family moved again likely caused a lot of interpersonal issues. There's been so much mystery and speculation surrounding Columbine, like the conflicting reports. That's due to two things at play. First, there were a lot of things said and spread to the news immediately after the shooting, which led to a lot of different lies being spread about what happened. Secondly, I think perception plays a major role in how Eric and Dylan felt compared to what they experienced. Dylan felt isolated and unloved by those around him, when reality proved the opposite. Depression makes it very easy to interpret anything as negative or shallow. Eric says he hates his father for messing with his social life, but another time, he says his parents are perfect and there's nothing they or anyone else could have done to stop this from happening. Dylan writes about how he and Eric are godlike and superior to people, while also writing about him failing to get a girlfriend and being suicidal. I want to talk more about the perception of this case when it comes to the copycats, because I'll be showing how the media made the Columbine story bigger than it really was.
Here's what's new tonight at 11, the first pictures of the teenager suspected of opening fire on a high school near Atlanta, Georgia. Good evening. This shooting comes exactly 1 month to the day after the deadly shooting in Colorado.
There's not much information about the personal life of this perpetrator, but this is the first copycat case relating to Columbine, and it only happened 1 month afterwards. Anthony Solomon was a 15-year-old guy who seemed to have a normal upbringing, but before he committed the shooting, he had left a suicide note, which made mentions to Columbine. After all of this, he says he felt isolated and was having a hard time in life. He and his girlfriend had gotten into a fight, but he perceived this as a breakup. On May 20th, 1999, Anthony went into Heritage High School with a rifle and a revolver and started shooting at people. Afterwards, he ran outside and was about to kill himself, but his assistant principals convinced him to just surrender, and he did. He injured 6 people, and luckily no one died. He was found guilty and was sentenced to 40 years, but this was reduced later on to 20 years, and as of July 26, 2016, he's on probation. He was found to be mentally ill, but I suppose he wasn't mentally ill enough to be seen as innocent by reason of insanity. All I've gathered from this case is mental health issues, suicidal ideation, and residence. There's likely more we don't know about, but I wasn't able to find much, probably because his story didn't interest the media as much, especially after Columbine.
More now on our top story, the school shooting in Santee. The level of grief there tonight is matched only by the level of bewilderment. How could a child do this, and why?
Charles Williams was a 15-year-old guy who lived in Maryland with his parents until they got divorced when he was 4. His ex-girlfriend said that he was popular in Maryland, but Charles' father had decided to move to California, and this isolated Charles from his friends and everyone else he grew up with. The move happened a year before the shooting, and another move happened 6 months later. He was bullied and outcasted at Santana High School because he was shorter than other boys his age. He befriended some skateboarders and smoked weed with them, but they too bullied him from time to time. An older man named Chris Reynolds was giving these group of kids drugs and alcohol, but only when they performed sexual acts for him. Charles didn't mention this for years, even after he was arrested. Chris Reynolds was sentenced for 40 years in prison for molesting other teenage boys. Some weeks before the shooting, Charles had made complaints to the school counselor about being bullied, and he told a security guard he would bring a gun to school. These claims haven't been substantiated. He told his friends he would pull a Columbine, and his friends asked him if he was serious, and he claimed he was joking. According to his peers, he had spoken of not wanting to live anymore, but he didn't try to kill himself after the shooting, and he didn't try suicide by cop either. The bullying was getting worse And a day before the shooting, Charles warned some friends, but they thought he was just joking again. On March 5th, 2001, Charles took his dad's revolver and he went into the boys' bathroom and shot someone to death. He leaves and starts shooting at anyone he sees. He went back into the bathroom at some point, and as the cops arrive, he's caught reloading and he chooses to surrender. In total, he shot and killed 2 students and injured 13 others, including 1 teacher. He was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. He became eligible for parole in 2018, but his attempts to get parole have been in vain so far. Some of his supporters say he shouldn't be sentenced so harshly as a juvenile, and for him to be resentenced. I think maybe people should let the justice system handle this stuff. None of these people were actually affected by what he did, so yeah. This case is a little hard to determine what the true motive was because Charles later on claims he wasn't trying to hurt or kill anyone, but clearly he knew what he was doing enough to warn his friends and hide behind the excuse of it being a joke. So it's best to go off of what we have evidence for instead of what Charles says. He felt vengeful for being bullied. I won't add suicidal ideation because he had many chances to attempt suicide, but he didn't take them. I'd say he does suffer from some kind of mental illness, but it's likely depression and not something like schizophrenia, which would obscure his perception of reality more directly. And I would say him feeling isolated and being sexually abused by an older man had created a lot of repressed rage within him. So, trauma is added into this, of course. Also, him making references to Columbine puts me on the fence about if this is a copycat or not, because it's not mentioned he researched the case or anything. I really don't know how comfortable I'd feel with this guy getting released, because even though he apologized at the time of the shooting, his actions make me wonder how much remorse he really feels. He minimizes his intentions that day and tries to appear more innocent than he really is, leaning into the fact that he was 15.
Jeffrey May is still in critical condition tonight at a Fargo hospital.
He suffered a stroke and his left side is paralyzed, but doctors don't know if that's permanent. His family, though, calls him a hero. They say he is able to communicate through notes, telling them what happened inside Red Lake High School Monday. Through his notes, May told his family that he tried to stab Jeffrey Weiss, the gunman, with a pencil when Weiss came at him with a gun.
Jeffrey Weiss was a 16-year-old Native American guy who lived with his father briefly on the Red Lake Indian Reservation. This was until his mother got custody over him again and moved to Minneapolis, living in a filthy trailer. Jeffrey spoke about how his mother was an alcoholic and how she was abusive towards him. His stepfather would also physically abuse him too, making him kneel in a corner for hours. At 8, his life would get harder when his father commits suicide after a standoff with the police. 2 years later, his mother was drinking and driving and got into a car accident that gave her severe brain damage. Jeffrey went back to the Red Lake Indian Reservation to live with his grandparents. In 2002, he was made to repeat 8th grade due to failing his classes and skipping school, which added on to the bullying he was already dealing with. There's conflicting reports about his social life and how he behaved at school. Some students say that he was a loner. Some students says he had friends. Some teachers say that he was troublesome. Some teachers say that he was quiet and behaved well, but he had bad grades. His own grandmother said he wasn't in school for 5 weeks before the shooting. His online activity gives us a better perspective of who he was. On Newgrounds, he created a few violent animations. He had an account on Nazi.org under his own name, condemning interracial couples and saying that rap music makes people violent. He was obsessed with the Columbine shooting, and he posted about how frustrated he was to live in Red Lake. In May 2004, he attempts suicide and starts cutting his wrist, but changes his mind. He tries to kill himself again in June, and his aunt takes him to a mental health facility and he's given Prozac to cope with his depression. On March 21st, 2005, Jeffrey kills his grandparents and takes his grandfather's police weapons and body armor and drives his police vehicle to Red Lake High School. He arrived and shot at the bodyguards and went into a classroom and started shooting at anyone who didn't deny the existence of God. A classmate of his, Jeffrey May, tackled him and he was able to distract him long enough to help other people escape. He was shot and was severely wounded, but ended up living. Weiss continued the shooting, and when he posed the question, "Do you believe in God?" instead of waiting for a response, he shot at his victims anyways. This was a reference to the Columbine shootings. But we see now that the "do you believe in God" question, it's not even, it's like Jeffrey makes it out to the front of a school and there's police there waiting for him, and they start shooting at each other. Once he's wounded, he chooses to end his own life, and in total, 10 people were killed, including himself and his family, and 9 were injured. For some background about the reservation itself, the people there have high rates of violence and suicide. People hardly finish high school, and those in that age range report having thoughts of suicide. Jeffrey White's environment was never going to produce anything good, and it's made worse because of the isolation of being a native and how they're often treated by the government. Jeffrey suffered from trauma, mental illness, and suicidal ideation. He was also definitely a copycat of the Columbine shooting and resonated with their outlook on life. He also had an extreme ideology and very strong feelings of rage with the decay of the environment around him. He was never necessarily wrong for pointing out how bad everything was, but his best choice was to leave and create a better life for himself. Instead, a combination of 6 different traits had led him to take vengeance against a society that had indeed failed him as an individual and a child. Still, he could have chosen better and maybe be an advocate for Native Americans who struggle with higher rates of depression and suicide.
Because we have some additional information about the shooting that took place at Virginia Tech. We are learning now from the campus website there is apparently a second shooting now that has taken place at Norris Hall.
Sung Hui Cho was a 17-year-old guy who was born in South Korea. At 3, he had a whooping cough, and this was caused by pneumonia, and that was caused by a heart condition he had to get an invasive procedure for. After this, he didn't want any physical contact from his own family or anyone else. Typically, when very young children get a surgery like that, it tends to have a negative effect on how they develop cognitively and behaviorally. Cho's case is more on the extreme side of this, but I'll explain why that may be the case later on. At 8, his parents moved the whole family to the United States so their children can have better work and education opportunities. They settled down in Virginia and attend church as Christians, which Cho would later rail against their faith. Cho struggled in elementary school socially speaking. He would come home crying every day saying he doesn't want to go back. This is particularly significant because he was later diagnosed with selective mutism, and his family back in South Korea took note of his silence and lack of affection towards them. But again, that's partly due to what he experienced at 3. There's nothing indicating that he was being bullied in elementary school. However, in middle school and high school, he would be bullied for being shy, acting weird, and at least one instance for being Asian. During middle school, his teachers notice how withdrawn he is, and this leads to his parents trying to get help for him, and he's diagnosed with severe depression, selective mutism, and an anxiety disorder. A lot of people are led to believe that he had undiagnosed autism, and I was led to feel the same way until I noticed that he only faced difficulties socially speaking and didn't have sensory issues or repetitive OCD-esque behaviors. I have a theory of my own that I think will help us make sense of these symptoms, but again, I'll talk more on that later after we talk about his life before the shooting. In 8th grade, the Columbine shooting happened, and Cho quickly idolized Eric and Dylan, writing in a school paper about how he wanted to repeat what they did. He displayed suicidal and homicidal thoughts, and this led to the school informing the parents about this, and he's sent to a mental health facility and put on antidepressants. These helped him quite a bit for the next year, but because they were working well, they decided to stop the treatment, not realizing that this was something he should have taken continuously. He's able to graduate high school, and against his parents' wishes, he goes to Virginia Tech. They say that the school would be too big for him to get individual care for him and his mental health. They even advise him to contact someone at his old high school if he needed any help. He never reached out for help though. His first major was business information systems, and even though he had minor issues with his roommate, he was excited about college. His parents see him often, and things seem to be good for freshman year. Sophomore year, he decides to switch his major to English and begins taking an interest in writing, but he's not open about what he's specifically writing about. It gets to the point where he submits a book idea to a publishing house in New York, but it gets rejected, and this depresses him. Later that same year, when he's a junior, he starts showing behavioral problems at college, and his contact with his family diminishes too. His poetry teacher says his writing was intimidating and violent. He also took photos of his girl classmates' legs and wrote disturbing poetry about them. Everyone in the class was uncomfortable with his behavior, and his teacher even told the department head she would resign if he wasn't kicked out of her classes. The head tried to get the police involved, but the lack of direct threats made it hard for them to really do anything about it. The head talked about how Cho was arrogant and obnoxious, but it was clear that this was coming from insecurity. They also said that Cho seemed incredibly lonely. and claimed that Cho admitted to being as such and not having any friends. They and other staff members urged Cho to go to counseling many times to no avail. His classmates knew him as a quiet loner who wouldn't respond when someone tried to say hi to him. His roommates claimed that he had an imaginary girlfriend named Jelly, who was a supermodel from space. They also advised anyone, especially women, to avoid coming to their dorm because of how unusual Cho was and his lack of boundaries when it came to women. He would go online and harass women on his campus, and he even stalked a couple. The police were called about his behavior again, but alas, they couldn't do much. But tell him to stop because he wasn't making any explicit threats. Something similar happened again and it had the same end result. No real consequences. Cho told a roommate of his, "I might as well kill myself now," and the police are involved again, and finally he's sent to a mental health facility again. Even though he was seen by a psychiatrist and he was declared to be mentally ill, some weird wording in Virginia's laws about who can own guns led to him being able to purchase one himself, since he wasn't involuntarily committed. He was supposed to get help as an outpatient, but this wasn't properly enforced. And clearly at this point we see that Cho is beyond saving now. All of this led to the inevitable. On April 16, 2007, Cho used 2 of the semi-automatic handguns he bought previously and headed to the residence hall located on the Virginia Tech campus and shot and killed 2 people. Afterwards, he went to the campus itself and a little before 10 a.m. started chaining the entrances shut so no one could escape. He went as far as to check how many people there were in each classroom, and soon after he would start shooting people. He went from classroom to classroom, killing whoever he saw. People started to understand what was going on and barricaded their doors before Cho reached them. The survivors say that he wasn't saying anything and just shot and reloaded whenever he needed to. The police come after 10 minutes of this and enter the building, and the moment Cho noticed the police coming, he shot himself in the head. In total, he shot and killed 33 people, including himself, and injured 23 others. His suicide note was found in his bedroom, and it made mentions of him hating the rich kids and the hedonism he had been a witness to. NBC had received a package full of videos Cho made alongside his manifesto. He made numerous references to Christianity and condemned others for either being hedonistic or for pretending to be good people when they're actually awful. He talked about how he viewed himself like Jesus Christ and said that Eric and Dylan were martyrs. He said things like, "You thought it was one pathetic boy's life you were extinguishing. Thanks to you, I die like Jesus Christ, to inspire generations of the weak and the defenseless people. And you had everything you wanted. Your Mercedes wasn't enough, you brats. Your golden necklaces weren't enough, you snobs. Your trust fund wasn't enough. Your vodka and cognac weren't enough. All your debaucheries weren't enough. Those weren't enough to fulfill your hedonistic needs. You had everything." This case is most notable for being the highest kill count in a school shooting in the United States. We know that technically the Bath School disaster is the worst school massacre that's happened here, but it was a bombing and not necessarily a school shooting. That being said, there's a lot we should go over in this case, but first I want to share my theory I mentioned earlier. I believe that Cho had schizotypal personality disorder. A lot of his behaviors do seem very similar to autism, but upon learning more about him and his background, I think schizotypal fits best. I thought at first his extreme reaction to the heart procedure when he was 3 was indicating that he had an underlying mental health condition that exacerbated his reaction. I tried to look into what conditions could be similar to what he experienced throughout his life, and he meets a lot of the criteria for schizotypal. He deeply struggled with having connections in his life, especially close ones. His odd, antisocial seeming behavior could be explained as cognitive or perceptual distortions and eccentricities of behavior. I think his manifesto showed odd beliefs and magical thinking because of how much he spoke in relation to religion and basically acting like he was akin to Jesus. Paranoid thoughts are definitely there since we see him constantly talk about how people raped his mind because they just have a strong dislike for him. Reality proved that people tried to connect with him, but he lacked the capacity and want for the connection to work. He definitely had a limited affect, and this is usually one of the more common things noticed in people who have schizo-related mental disorders. He wore sunglasses inside and wore clothing that hid his body and face, and of course acted weird enough for people to not want to be around him, so I would count that as odd behavior. Excessive social anxiety and a lack of close friends or relationships. Also, 30 to 50% of those with this personality disorder have major depressive disorder. Treatment for this disorder includes antidepressants, the very thing that was actually helping him. Despite not having much capacity for closeness, he did still feel lonely and wanted friendship. This issue is also found in those who are schizotypal. This is just my little armchair theory, of course, and you're more than allowed to disagree. But I would like to see some evidence against what I'm saying other than simply disagreeing without any further thought or discussion. He wasn't diagnosed as schizotypal, but with everything I've laid out, it's possible it was missed. And people focus too much on the autism angle to see it. Now that I've set the stage and helped you get a potentially more accurate picture of things, we see suicidal ideation, mental illness, trauma due to the medical procedure, his vengefulness and major ideas of persecution against himself, rage, and resonance with Columbine. I spent much more time with this case because Cho has killed the most people in a school shooting, and it was harder than usual to fully get a picture of what he was struggling with that got to the point of him doing something like this. He showed no mercy for anyone he shot at, and to my knowledge didn't spare anyone, like other shooters have. I think the biggest factor is him being so isolated because of his condition. That extreme level of detachment could seem psychopathic, but with context, we see his mental health getting incredibly worse with no treatment before his first psychiatric visit and afterwards. Puberty typically starts bringing up mental health problems, but it was clear he was already dealing with some beforehand. And again, I think it's because he's schizotypal, but it's a biological thing, which makes me think that his family is hiding some information about a similar relative, or they simply aren't aware of having a relative like that. It's no excuse for what he did, but we can see how his perception was warped over time, and his undiagnosed disorder led to him believing in a lot of irrational things.
And we are getting a more complete picture this morning of the gunman as police try to learn more about why 20-year-old Adam Lanza went on his bloody rampage.
Adam Lanza was a 20-year-old man who lived in Connecticut with his parents. He didn't speak until he was 3 and had a lot of sensory issues, which led to him needing an IEP. His father described him as a normal little weird kid who liked playing with Legos with him and coming up with stories alongside it. Adam later in his life would often reflect back on his younger years and talk about how he missed being a little kid. As elementary school would go on, he would struggle to express his emotions, and when he was in a school play, he practiced making facial expressions in the mirror. In 5th grade, he talked about how he had a low view of himself and said everyone else deserved more than him. He and a classmate of his wrote a book about a grandma using her cane to go around and shoot people, and there was an emphasis on killing children. The two tried to sell the book at school to others. Around the same school year, when Adam was 9, his parents decided to be separated but not 100% divorced. Adam welcomed the change because he said his parents were as irritating to each other as they were to him. Entering middle school, Adam at first was excited enough to show his father around, but after some time, the new fast-paced environment proved to be overwhelming for him. In 7th grade, he had quit playing the saxophone, quit the school band, and quit playing sports he used to find enjoyable but now says he doesn't care for them. He also wrote a very violent essay, which caused his teacher a lot of concern and promptly made him write about something nicer. He had many panic attacks, and this led to his mother having to come to school to calm him down. At 13, his parents, out of concern for his mental health, took him to a psychiatrist, and he was diagnosed with autism. His parents were happy to understand his condition now and how they could help, but Adam refused to accept the diagnosis. He was also diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and OCD, basically the autism cocktail. His psychiatrist recommended he be homeschooled, and from 8th grade his parents took care of the schooling, eventually with his mother doing most of it, but not because his father was unwilling. His mother grew to be overly accommodating to Adam, and this led to his symptoms worsening, and it got to the point where he didn't want his mom to touch certain surfaces because of contamination. A psychologist said that his mother was basically becoming a prisoner in her own home. At 14, his parents took him to Yale University's Child Study Center to get him additional help. He was prescribed Lexapro, but he deeply struggled with the side effects of it, and so he was taken off of it, and he never tried any other medication again. He didn't understand, though, that he truly had autism, and he needed treatment for it so he could manage his symptoms better. He still refused to accept the diagnosis and refused to do therapy. To keep a good relationship with him, his mother indulged in his interests and took him to the shooting range. He briefly attended public high school and was part of a tech club. His father talked about a tech party Adam hosted, and despite him having a lot of good social interactions, he asked, "Why do I need friends?" He was put back into homeschooling, and he graduated high school at 16. He began working at a computer repair shop until it closed down for good. Around 17, his parents officially get divorced, and it seems to be mutual. His father is still willing to pay for Adam's and his brother's education. As part of the divorce agreement, he had to buy a car for Adam, and he did, and said Adam was a very cautious driver. Also, during this time, his mother left home more often to give Adam space and tried to develop his sense of independence. However, Adam spent a lot of time developing a strong interest in mass shootings and went as far as to edit Wikipedia articles about them. At 18, he wanted to enlist in the military, but as the time came, he chose not to sign up and instead went to his community college and started taking courses. He and his father got into an argument over it because his father felt Adam might overwhelm himself with all of the courses he was trying to take. This argument leads his father and other people to believe this is the reason why Adam cut contact. While he was in college, he struggled a lot and was even crying for 2 hours on the floor of his bathroom because he kept failing tests despite how much he studied. Despite him clearly not being able to deal with what he had given himself, there was a disconnect between his ambitions and his actual capacity. Adam delved deeper into isolation and also cut contact with his brother. He began to only speak to his mother through email and covered his bedroom windows with black trash bags. The deterioration of his mental health is also caused by his anorexia. He was vegan since he was 13, but his anorexia was less about the vegan diet and more about him only preferring certain foods. He also spent a lot of time obsessively playing video games like WoW. Every weekend he would go to an arcade and play DDR for hours on end, and there's even a video recording of it. He spent more time online researching mass shootings, especially Columbine, and even had made fan posts about them before deleting them a month before the shooting. He had sympathy for Dylan and called Eric a monster. At some point, he wrote an essay called Selfish, which talked about how women were selfish, not seeing the irony in what he was saying, as his mom was basically his life support. He never engaged with women, and others even speculated he might be asexual. People have noticed that Adam defended pedophilia and simultaneously hated pedophiles, which led people to think he might be one himself. There isn't any proof he actually is, and I'd argue it's unfortunately pretty common for edgy loser white guys to make statements like that without wholeheartedly believing it. Anyways, a year before the shooting, he called into a radio show and talked about the Travis the Chimp incident and likened the chimp's story to the story of how children are raised. It's clear he's making a lot of parallels between himself and the chimp. He also wrote about how he believed in anarcho-primitivism, which basically means the guy who spends his whole life on computers and technology yearns to engage in a fantasy about living like an orangutan. I mock him because in 2012, when Hurricane Sandy happened, his house didn't have electricity for a few days and he was terrified. I think I've covered enough of the bases to start talking about the shooting itself. His mother had grown increasingly worried about him, and she felt like she was losing him. That fear would be worse than realized. On December 14, 2012, around 9 a.m., Adam shot his mother to death and put 4 bullets in her. He takes his car and drives to Sandy Hook Elementary School with a rifle his mother bought. He shoots through the glass of the school's doors and begins shooting at the staff. He enters a first-grade classroom and starts shooting at the kids and teacher who were huddled up in the bathroom. The only survivor was a 6-year-old girl who played dead and was hidden in the rest of the bodies. He goes to another classroom and shoots at students hiding beneath their desks. Some of them manage to escape as his gun either jams or is in need of a reload. One of the classrooms he passed up was another teacher hiding the students in the bathroom. Many other classrooms and other parts of the school had done their best to hide the children. The police arrive and Adam takes notice of this and decides to kill himself. In total, he shot and killed 20 children and 6 teachers, and also injured 2. At first, it was reported that Adam's brother was the perpetrator because he had Ryan's ID on him, but this was quickly cleared up. Adam had destroyed his hard drive before leaving to go commit the shooting. In this case, we see suicidal ideation, mental illness, him having disdain for the society he lives in, and resonance. His extensive research on mass shootings and resonance with Dylan Klebold makes me think there's an element of infamy for this case, especially since he said that the 2011 terrorist attack in Norway was impressive. He struggled with his confidence throughout his life, and this is caused by a gap between his competence and what he wants. An old psychologist he saw says, "While Adam likes to believe that he's completely logical, in fact, he's not at all, and I've called him on it." At 9, we see him say he doesn't think highly of himself, and when he's a young teen, he denies his autism diagnosis and doesn't want to do therapy. His struggles in college show us he's having a hard time learning the material, and all of this, I've pointed out, has been a blow to his ego. People note that Adam is articulate in the radio call he did, but they fail to remember that he was actively trying to sound that way because his natural way of speaking was hard to comprehend. I think he had some sort of image he wanted to maintain in front of others, and that's shown in him thinking about joining the army or attending college to be perceived as more functional and competent. His essay about women being selfish could have been inspired by his own feelings of inferiority, that he's a grown-ass man who has to rely on his mom for everything. She babied him for sure, and that story about him tying his own shoes and her being shocked is proof of two things. One, she viewed him as less capable, and two, he's capable but has fallen into codependency with her, likely conflicted between two contradictory truths. His denial of his disability only leads to one logical conclusion: he specifically is incapable. I mean, what else would you think if you thought you had all of these problems for no apparent reason? Adam attending Sandy Hook and making statements about missing how it was when he was younger makes me think about a future case in this video where the perpetrator shot up their old elementary school partly because they had the best memories there. Him having Ryan's ID during the shooting feels like it's a part of his nostalgia kick. He had a better relationship with Ryan and his parents back in elementary school, and very likely wanted to return so he could die in a place he loved, which is mortifying considering he killed 20 children who were between the ages of 6 and 7. But this was a time for him that there was no autism, so to speak. He wasn't nearly as jaded about the world, and he was excited about the future. One of his old friends said that he pitied children because they were brainwashed by controlling teachers and parents. This is interesting to note because he might have seen his own mother as controlling, even though the dynamic grew to be the other way around. His psyche was so jumbled at the time of the shootings, he might even thought he was saving the children in some way from the fate he had come to. His mental health was clearly off the rails, and his father speculated if Adam had undiagnosed schizophrenia throughout his life, but I have a theory that fits better. Adam suffered from anorexia, and there's a link between prolonged periods of severe starvation and psychosis. He may have not been necessarily schizophrenic, and I think my theory, combined with his autistic symptoms worsening and not getting treatment, led to his mental downward spiral. Adam's resistance to the idea that he isn't right or seeing things clearly stops any hope of someone helping him. In 2008, someone actually reported that Adam would kill his mother and shoot up Sandy Hook. He said that this was a conversation he overheard, and he reported it to the police. But, as the police do in these cases, they didn't follow up or give much concern to the claim. This being a real event that happened 4 years before the shooting is insane. I think at 16, when Adam graduated high school, he thought about if he wanted to try and have a future in the Army's college, or enact his desire to destroy the lives around him and make a name for himself through tragedy. This case is referred to a lot as well when it comes to copycat shootings.
We are just getting word here of a school shooting. This is what we're getting from the Douglas County, Oregon Sheriff's Department. They are, quote, responding to reports of an active shooter at the campus of Umpqua Community College. This is in Roseburg, Oregon. And we can now confirm for you that according to preliminary reports, there are 10 who are dead.
Christopher Harper Mercer was a 26-year-old man who had lived with his mother in California for most of his life. In 2008, he tried to enroll in the military, but was discharged because he failed to meet the basic requirements of basic training. It may have been because he attempted to kill himself, but the military hasn't made any comments about that. He graduated from a school meant for teens with learning disabilities. His mother had said online that her and her son have autism. He attended college from 2010 to 2012. In 2013, his mother got a job opportunity in Oregon, and she noticed that he was happy because he was an open carry state. He and his mother spent a lot of time together at the shooting range and had 14 guns in their apartment. Even though he spent a lot of time with his mother, he was feeling very isolated. When he was attending Umpqua, he was facing suspension if he didn't improve his grades since they were below a C. The day of the shooting, he handed one of the survivors a package which contained writings about his motive, which showed his interest in mass shootings and how he had resonated with Elliot Rodgers and his frustrations with being a virgin. It also shows his anger towards black men and how he felt upset that his life hadn't amounted to anything and how he was lonely. He seemed to want infamy as well, as a way to make something of himself before he killed himself. In his own words, he had no friends, no job, and no girlfriend. I wasn't able to see the source myself, but law enforcement said that he was hate-filled, a white supremacist, and was anti-religious. On October 1st, 2015, Christopher had walked into a classroom on campus and started shooting at the students and staff. One of the survivors says he asked them about their view of God, but regardless of what their answer was, he shot them. He continues to terrorize the students until the police arrive, and he gets into a shootout with them. The moment he's hit, he takes his own life. In total, he shot and killed 10 people, including himself, and injured 8 others. Christopher's motive seems to include him wanting to take vengeance against society, him being mentally ill, him being suicidal, him having an extreme ideology, him wanting infamy, and resonating with the previous school shootings before him. You see more and more as the years go on that these more recent shooters resonate with previous perpetrators a lot and feel seen by them in a way that society seemingly hasn't afforded them.
I'm Nigel Robertson. We have breaking news out of Townville in Anderson County. We want to bring you live pictures here. This is at Townville Elementary School, and here is what we know. Anderson County Sheriff's Office tells us crews are here after a possible shooting.
Jesse Osborne was a 14-year-old guy who lived with his father and had started developing troubling habits. In elementary school, he was seen as friendly and had good grades, but in middle school, he would start abusing animals, smashing frogs and watching videos of cats being tortured. He was being teased by one of his classmates, and Jesse said that if he brought a rifle to school, the classmate would be the first one to get shot. Not long after this, Jesse brought a machete and a hatchet to school, and he was reported for this, getting expelled and arrested. He was homeschooled after this, and this isolation led him to spending a lot of time on the internet engaging with his dark fantasies. He discovered the Columbine fanbase on Tumblr, and his interest in school shootings soared. He claimed he wanted to kill 50 or 60 people to achieve a higher kill count and to be the youngest to do it. On September 28, 2016, Jesse took his dad's handgun and told his online friends he would be on the news soon. He goes downstairs and shoots his father in the back of the head. He gave warm goodbyes to his pets and took his father's car and drove to Townville Elementary School. He chose the elementary school specifically because there weren't any security guards there, unlike the middle school. Before he started shooting at the students, he actually called his grandparents sobbing, but I wasn't able to find out what he had said, if he had said anything, that is. He shot in the air and yelled about how he hated his life and then proceeded to shoot at the kids on the playground. Very soon, a firefighter tackles him as his gun jams and he's taken into custody. He told the police he ditched the bulletproof vest he was going to bring because he was going to hell and called his grandparents to confess for what he did and was going to do. In total, he shot and killed 2 people, his father and his 6-year-old boy, and injured 3 others. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but he appealed and was able to get 75 years instead, meaning he'll be released when he's 89. Jesse had made claims about his father being abusive and an alcoholic, but the investigators haven't seen much evidence for that. He did apparently deal with some bullying, but we can see here he partook in bullying as well. I would say he suffers from some sort of mental illness since he was torturing animals and alongside enjoyed gore content. It's suspected that he has ASPD, and I'm inclined to believe that, but sociopaths are usually created by being in an abusive environment. So, because of that, I'm adding trauma to this case, even if we aren't 100% sure if his father was abusive or not. He clearly wanted infamy with him saying that he wanted to kill 50 to 60 people. He was also heavily inspired by other school shootings, including Columbine. I was more willing to believe Jesse's allegations of abuse because we've gone over so many cases similar to his and we see abuse present. That being said, I would say these perpetrators generally don't need trauma to be pushed to do something like this.
We now know one of the people shot and killed in Rancho Tehama is a woman the shooter was previously accused of stabbing.
Kevin Neal was a 44-year-old grown-ass man who argued with his neighbors about his gun use and was spiraling out of control. His mother and sister say that he had struggled with mental illness and anger issues all of his life, and his sister believed that he was on drugs. His mother said she noted that he was getting worse around 2016, and it said that he grew obsessed with conspiracy theories. He concocted one of his own and believed his neighbors were cooking meth in their house, causing his dogs to fall ill. There's no evidence of his neighbors doing this, but before he went on to commit the shooting, he told his mother he felt helpless and was tired of fighting with his neighbors. Beforehand, though, on January 31st, 2017, he had stabbed one of his neighbors and assaulted their mother-in-law. His mother posted his bail, and he went on to still harass his neighbors until they got a restraining order in which he wasn't allowed to own his guns anymore. He gave them up, but instead had made the very same firearms he'd used on the day of the shooting. On the night of November 13th, in the morning of the 14th, Kevin shot and killed his own wife and hid her body within the house. Afterwards, he went and killed some of the neighbors he thought were cooking meth. He steals their car and proceeds to go around shooting at anyone he sees, and he eventually went to Rancho Elementary School and started shooting at the windows. He injured some students, but luckily none of them died. After he left the school, he continued shooting people and stealing their cars until law enforcement caught up to him. He had a shootout with the police and then decided to end his own life. In total, he shot and killed 6 people, including his own wife, and injured 18. I mean, look at this guy. He was guilty before he even did that shit. Anyways, this guy was mentally ill, and I suspect he had paranoid schizophrenia just based off of the other cases we covered. He was suicidal, and apparently saw no way out of his current predicament in life regarding the neighbors. He also wanted to take vengeance against everyone, because he felt that the people around him failed him and never helped him. I thought about putting extreme ideology for him, believing in conspiracy theory nonsense, but I've chosen not to because I'm not aware of what specifically he believed in and how much that influenced his choice to shoot up a bunch of people and then kill himself.
And I'm gonna be the next school shooter of 2018. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida. It's gonna be a big event.
Nikolas Cruz was a 19-year-old man who lived with his adoptive parents in Florida, and there isn't anything known about his father since he was absent. His mother is a criminal, and she even tried to buy crack while she was pregnant with Nikolas. So, you can see how he ended up in an orphanage with a mother like that. He had trouble with his behavior since preschool and needed an IEP. His psychiatrist diagnosed him with ADHD and ODD. When he was 14, he was involuntarily admitted into a residential treatment facility. At 17, he was investigated for Snapchat posts of him cutting himself and wanting to buy a gun. He was also diagnosed with depression, but it has circulated a lot that Nikolas had autism. But this turned out to not be true because he was never diagnosed with it. Online, he posted photos of himself with various weapons and spewed anti-Black and anti-Muslim slurs. His guns were found with swastikas on them, leading a lot of people to believe he has extremist views, and I definitely don't see evidence opposing that belief. He also idolized a lot of mass shooters, including Eric and Dylan. He also posted a comment online saying he would be a professional school shooter. In school, his former classmates saw him as a gun-obsessed loner, and one of his classmates' moms had said that Nikolas talked about killing animals. There had been some calls to the police saying that Nikolas threatened to shoot up the school and how he's at risk. There was another call 2 months prior to the shooting about him and his desire to kill. Obviously, not much was done about him since. He went on to do whatever the hell he wanted. He was transferred between numerous schools because of his behavior issues. And of course, he had been threatening other students. He eventually made it to Marjorie Douglas High School, but was expelled because of his behavior. He was still enrolled in school, but he wasn't allowed to bring backpacks due to what he was saying to people. He became very depressed when his adoptive parents died, and there's really no shock as to what he's gonna do. On February 14th, 2018, Nikolas Ubered to Marjorie Douglas High School with an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle. He warns the girl he walks past that something bad is going to happen and she should leave. She makes a run for it, and he starts shooting down the hallway at other students. He went past classrooms and shot at the glass in the doors, and this managed to kill and injure people. He goes upstairs, but the classrooms are empty, so he goes to the 3rd floor and shoots confused staff and students. During this, the fire alarm goes off, and there's a lockdown being set in place, which panicked people along with the sounds of gunshots. And people started fleeing the school building. Nikolas goes to the teacher's lounge to try to shoot out the window to catch the people who are escaping, but he's unsuccessful. I'm not sure how he managed to pull this off, but he drops his rifle and blends into the students and hangs out at a fast food restaurant before walking off. The police stop him as a suspect and they arrest him. In total, he shot and killed 17 people and injured 17 more. But another thing I want to mention is 3 people who survived that shooting killed themselves because of the PTSD of the incident. Now, typically when a child dies, it's the parent who commits suicide. But I think this is the first case I've seen where the survivors couldn't live with the trauma of what happened, and that's fucking heartbreaking. Nikolas pled guilty to all charges, He has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Him having autism was such a major point of what people knew about the case, and it's so frustrating to go over these more well-known cases and realize a lot of what I thought I knew wasn't even fucking true. The media failing to convey accurate information isn't a problem of the past, it's a problem of how journalism is done when something major happens. I really hope this video has helped other people see these cases for what they are. That being said, Nikolas was clearly mentally ill. He wasn't suicidal, but he was dealing with depression. The prosecutors of his case showed 3 videos of him talking about how much he hated people and how this would make him notorious. I'm adding rage and extremist ideology, but I'm in the dark about how much that influenced him to do the shooting. Also, for anyone mad about the police fumbling the hell out of those warnings, most of them resigned, and Sheriff Israel also stepped away after this, and with a name like that, there's genuinely no doubt in my mind how all of this happened.
Students at UNC Charlotte, staff, faculty, and other members of the campus community are waking up to the aftermath of a mass shooting.
Tristan Terrell was a 23-year-old man who was autistic and was reportedly critical of the gun culture in America, saying that it was too easy for people to obtain a gun. He lived with his parents for a while until his mother passed away from breast cancer, and this hurt him deeply. He and his father moved away so they could get away from the grief of his mother's death and live somewhere new. He enrolled in community college, but he had to step away from it due to financial debt, and this gave him a lot of anxiety. He had been planning on shooting up his university for some months, and his online activity showed that he was doing a lot of research, specifically about the Sandy Hook shooting. On April 30th, 2019, Tristan got his pistol and went to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and started shooting inside an anthropology class and wasn't aiming for anyone in particular. One of the students in there tackled him to stop him, but was also shot during this altercation, leading to the student dying, but also saving more lives. The police come and arrest Tristan. In total, he shot and killed 2 people and injured 4. He got life in prison without the possibility of parole. I wasn't able to see much more about Tristan's life, which is unfortunate, but a few things jump out at me. He had autism, and it's possible that his stress about his financial status regarding college made him think his future was going down the drain, and he needed to make a name for himself. This, along with his mother's death, likely caused him to be depressed. It seems he resonated with the Sandy Hook shooting, and we know that Adam Lanza also had autism. Him withdrawing from college was definitely a huge red flag people can see on the outside, and it's unfortunate his father or his grandparents didn't take much note of it.
3 people were killed in a shooting at a high school outside Detroit late this afternoon. I want to bring in NBC's Megan Fitzgerald, who is covering this for us. And Megan, I understand from officials on the scene as we are getting this briefing just in that the 3 people killed are believed to be students. Do I have that right?
Ethan Crumbly was a 15-year-old guy who lived with his parents and didn't really have any friends. His parents were often out and about going to bars and leaving him alone at home. This concerned a neighbor enough for them to call CPS, but it's not clear if the report had been followed up on. Earlier in 2021, he had texted his mother about seeing demons, and it was clear that his mental health was declining. He also was torturing animals and recording it, making Molotovs, and making drawings of himself committing a school shooting. He apparently had put the head of a baby bird inside a jar and put it into the school bathroom. He did all of this without his parents doing anything whatsoever. Towards the end of October 2021, Ethan's only friend had moved away, and his pet dog had died, and now he was even more depressed. He was reported at school by a teacher right before the shooting for searching up ammo on his phone, and his mother was informed about this. However, all she said was, "LOL, I'm not mad at you." The next day was when the shooting happened, but first the day starts off with Ethan being reported again by a teacher for a drawing he made depicting his own suicide with words like, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." His parents were called to the school, and the school had told them he needed to get help within 2 days, or they'd contact CPS. 4 days prior to this, his parents had given him a semi-automatic handgun, and so they didn't accept the idea that he was suicidal, and even withheld the information about the gun from the school and left. Soon after this, he goes into the school bathroom and he leaves with his gun. At 12:50 p.m. on November 30th, 2021, Ethan starts shooting at students in the hallways as they transition to their next class. He tried to get into the classrooms, but once everyone had heard what was going on, they quickly locked all the doors and hid themselves inside. News spread quickly about what was going on, but the perpetrator wasn't known yet. Despite this, Ethan's mother texted him, "Ethan, don't do it," showing she definitely had a clear enough understanding of his mental health that she immediately assumed it was him. The police arrived shortly and were able to arrest him. In total, he shot and killed 4 people and injured 7. He was charged as an adult and got life in prison without the possibility of parole. His parents were actually charged too. This is the first time the parents of a perpetrator have been charged with anything relating to what their child did in terms of school shootings. They both got 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter and were given the highest sentence of 15 years in prison and are eligible for parole after 10. This case is laughably awful. The parents were incredibly selfish, and they even bought their own lawyers and didn't even do that for their own son. I can't tell you how absurd it is that these people thought that literally ignoring everything was going to be good for the long term. At this point in the video, it's 2021. There's no excuse of, oh, it was the 90s, the 80s, or the 70s. That's why the parents didn't know what to do about mental health. This is not ignorance. This is neglect. People too often want to believe, oh, these poor parents had no idea what they were doing. Like, can we please remember these are grown-ass adults? They chose to have children and know good and well. What happens when you deprive a child of love and attention and just literal presence? We need to accept that, yes, it's our first time being human, but that doesn't entirely negate the abuse and the cruelty we inflict on children and people in general as a society. Let's begin with the factors that led to this. Ethan suffered from depression, as we can see, but him speaking of demons makes me wonder if this is related to having negative thoughts about himself, or maybe paranoid schizophrenia. He hasn't been diagnosed with that as far as I know, so we'll settle for the former. He was suicidal, and I suspect he didn't follow through with killing himself because he was stopped by the police too quickly for him to act in time. He was also placed on suicide watch immediately after being put in prison. With what we know about his parents, he definitely has trauma, and I suspect that him feeling abandoned by his parents had led him to believe the world itself rejected him too. He was already isolated and didn't have any friends. I'm willing to add vengefulness to this case, due to his circumstances and what can be implied about what was going through his mind.
Yes, Mike and Rebecca, 19 of the 21 victims are kids believed to range between the ages of 7 to just 10 years old. We do know that the suspected shooter is now dead, and now investigators are just trying to piece together this story so they can bring the families closure.
Salvador Ramos was an 18-year-old man who lived with his mother in Uvalde, Texas. In kindergarten, he was praised for being kind and a hard worker, though his later school years would be full of bullying for a variety of things about Salvador and his life. His mother was also abusive, and Salvador's ex-girlfriend claims he might have been sexually abused by one of his mom's boyfriends. She goes on to say that he tried to tell his mom about it, but she didn't believe him. A big factor in determining if an incident was traumatic or not is how the parent reacts to it. I can imagine, if this is true, that this fucked him up big time. His mother abused drugs and was getting evicted by her own mother for it. In high school, as you can guess, he wasn't doing well. He was struggling academically and was cutting his own face. He also abused and killed animals like cats and live streamed it on Yubo. He was reported on Yubo, but I guess Yubo doesn't give a fuck. He liked to drive around at night shooting strangers with his BB gun and egging them. He worked at 2 fast food restaurants, but he would treat his female coworkers poorly, and a coworker said he seemed to take his anger out on the most innocent person in the room. He talked online about how he really wanted fame and wanted to get more views on his social media accounts. On May 24th, 2022, Salvador was at his grandparents' house at this point in his life because he didn't want to live with his mother anymore. He got into an argument with his grandmother because he failed to graduate high school, and he proceeded to shoot her point blank in the face. After this, he takes her car and starts driving to Robb Elementary School. He texted his online girlfriend what he was doing, and all she said was, "Cool." She's from Germany, and they charged her with failing to report a planned crime. Salvador crashes into a barricade by the school, climbs the fence, and walks into the school with his AR-15 style rifle. He enters a classroom and starts firing at the students and teacher. He says, "You're all going to die," and he takes some of the victim's blood and writes LOL on the chalkboard. A police officer yells and asks if anyone was in the school who needed help. A young girl shouts for help, and Salvador goes over and shoots her to death. He goes into another classroom and continues his rampage. He starts stomping on the victims' heads and spitting on them. The police come and try to shoot at Salvador, but he fires back and hits some of the officers. There are more police outside, and one of the teachers who was shot called her husband and told him she was dying. He tried to rush in to help her, but the police stopped him, and she eventually died of her wounds. Parents of the children wanted to see their kids and help them, but the police refused. They stood there and pepper sprayed, tased, handcuffed, and pinned down the parents. A random United States Border Patrol tactical unit agent had been called by his wife, who was a teacher at this school, and despite him being off duty, came over as fast as he could and started to help children escape without entering the school or engaging with the shooter. For reference, he arrived 1 hour after the police had. More agents came to help, and the police chief, who had sat there for an hour trying different keys to get inside the classroom, finally got the master key and entered. They all shot at Salvador and killed him, finally ending the shooting, but not the mystery. You see, there's actually evidence that the door was never locked to begin with due to a malfunction. There's also footage of the hallway, and the police didn't try to open the doors. Earlier in the incident, a teacher tried to close the doors to the school when they spotted Salvador, but he was able to open the door just fine. The police also had access to a crowbar type of tool that could open the door if they really wanted to. Apparently, the police department has changed their version of events multiple times, and this has led to a lot of confusion as to what really happened. The police chief admits that he made some wrong calls, but still tries to justify his actions. Regardless of what that dumbass had to say, he resigned from his position and was charged with 10 counts of child endangerment. Other officers have either resigned or were fired. Let's actually talk about the perpetrator now. In total, he shot and killed 21 people and injured 18. His grandmother actually survived getting shot in the face, which surprised the hell out of me when I saw that. Anyways, Salvador was clearly not going to live a good life with the cards that were given to him. He was mentally ill, potentially suicidal since he was self-harming, very angry as a person in general, traumatized greatly by his awful mother, clearly hated the world because of how much he had been bullied, and wanted infamy for what he did. I don't feel the need to really touch on why Salvador did what he did when it's pretty obvious what he had going on and what led him there.
Released new information about the gunman in Monday's school shooting in South St. Louis. Fox 2's Laura Simon outside Central VPA High School, where a tribute to the victims is growing.
Orlando Harris was a 19-year-old man who struggled with his mental health quite a bit, but surprisingly his family tried to get him all the help they could. His classmates had said that he was quiet and kept to himself, but his drama class had said he was outgoing and talked to a lot of people. Still, at home, when his family found out he had a gun, they removed it from him quickly and had the police take it away and give it to someone else. Orlando was committed to mental health facilities multiple times, and his family would check his room every once in a while, out of concern. They spoke with people at the mental health facility to keep in touch. They went as far as checking his mail and trying to make sure he felt loved. They did everything right here, but it still wasn't enough. A note Orlando left in his car before he started the shooting had said, "I don't have any friends, I don't have any family, I've never had a girlfriend, I've never had a social life. I've been an isolated loner my entire life." This was the perfect storm of a mass shooter. He also wrote about how he aimed to kill 30 people and wanted to achieve infamy for this and be on national news. Somehow, he was able to gain access to an AR-15 and had hundreds of rounds of ammo. On October 24th, 2022, Orlando walked into the school with his rifle and started shooting at people. His gun jams at some point, but he continues to chase down and shoot people. He yells, "You're all going to fucking die," and tries to get inside of classrooms by shooting the windows out. The police arrive and he gets into a shootout with them, and he gets shot and killed by one of the police officers. In total, he shot and killed 2 people and injured 7. As sad as this case is, I do feel it's a much better one than the rest. Finally, the family of the perpetrator is doing everything in their power to stop him from hurting others or himself. I expected this more as we get into the 2010s and 2020s. But unfortunately, what the family did in terms of help is very rare. They truly did their best, and I can respect that. Orlando had severe mental health issues, displayed suicidal ideation, and wanted vengeance and infamy. As to why his family wasn't able to save him from himself, all I can think is they were earnest in their efforts to love him, but likely had trouble understanding him and knowing what he needed to feel loved. It's not his family's fault. He took interest in other school shootings and did extensive research about them. The conflicting accounts about him could be explained easily by him maybe having more of an interest in his drama class. He wanted infamy, so I don't doubt that particular class fulfilled his need for attention. Also, from what I understand, acting stuff like that allows you room, socially speaking, to be someone entirely different and bring that character to life. It was likely a nice escape for him since he saw himself as being a loner his whole life.
They say Andre Hale killed 6 innocent people for notoriety.
Now, before we get into the details of the report, we want to remember those victims.
Aiden Hale was a 28-year-old grown-ass man who is quite the nutcase. They attended Covenant Elementary School, and they wrote about how it was the happiest years of their life. After, they attended middle school, and they played on the girls' basketball team, where they felt accepted by his teammates. He was bullied by everyone else, so he felt a deeper connection to the team than a regular person would. Actually, what if I told you this freak was obsessed with his old basketball team up until he died? Yes, he held on very dearly to an experience he had in middle school. He felt strongly attracted to them, but despite all of these feelings, he wasn't actually friends with any of them. He basically just stalked them on social media and wrote extensively about them in his diary. He wasn't only obsessed with them because they were kind to him in middle school. No, he was obsessed with them because they were black. He was under the impression that his whiteness prevented him from interacting with them and his other classmates, blaming his skin color and economic privilege as to why these black girls weren't sexually interested in him. At the time, he was a woman, so he grew to hate these black girls because they were heterosexual. He was pissed when he saw them get boyfriends and such. I'm calling Aiden by he/they pronouns because yes, he does seem to identify as a man. However, what he really wanted was to be a black man, so he wouldn't get rejected or passed up by these girls. He hadn't realized he could change his gender until later on in his life. But truthfully, if he found out about people who identify as transracial, I have a bad feeling he too would have gone down that route. He wrote about how he hated Donald Trump, and this has misled a lot of people into thinking Aiden had left-wing politics. He also wrote about hating Muslims and Indians. It seems his hatred of Trump was fueled by not wanting to seem racist against black people and wanting to seem like an ally. As a black woman myself, the way he wrote about the black girls he was obsessed with is far from allyship and goes more into fetishization and feeling entitled to their bodies and attention. That's an extremely white racist thing to do. I felt the need to mention this about Aiden because this is genuinely mostly what his story is. He didn't want black lesbians and referred to them using homophobic slurs. This dude is pathetic as hell, and to continue on how pathetic he was, he grew interested in school shootings some years before he committed his own and acted as if he and Eric were like two peas in a pod. He wanted to shoot up the middle school he went to previously, but decided against it because of its mostly black population. He didn't want to seem racist, so he targeted Covenant Elementary School instead. Wow, his sense of morality is brilliant. As you can imagine, his parents were AFK, so there's an element of emotional neglect, and he complained about his father in his diary a lot. He also wrote that killing a lot of people and having infamy for it would make him a god, like his heroes, Eric and Dylan. On March 27, 2023, Aiden texts his suicide note to one of his old basketball teammates. And thankfully, that teammate contacts the authorities immediately and the police are made aware of Aiden's poor mental health. It's too late though. Aiden walks into Covenant Elementary School with one of his pistols and shoots a security guard, a black person, mind you. They proceed to keep shooting, and this sets off the fire alarm, but it wasn't known at this point this was a school shooting. As young students and teachers are leaving the classrooms, he shoots at them, and now everyone else knows what's going on. The police arrive and put this tragedy to an end and kill Aiden. In total, he shot and killed 3 children and 3 teachers and injured 2. First things first, mental illness. This is incredibly clear too. It's said that Aiden also had autism. They left a suicide note for that old teammate and for their parents. They felt a strange desire to try to target white people during their attack because they felt that their own whiteness and white people in general ruined their chances of getting with heterosexual black girls. So, vengeance. They also were heavily into the Columbine shooting and acted like Eric and Dylan were gods. They too wanted to achieve that level of infamy and purposefully chose to target young children due to wanting to make a headline. I would add in extreme ideology, because even though it's pretty vague what political beliefs they have that aren't based on trying to have sex with black women, it's clear they had extreme beliefs which led them to try to target white kids. I almost want to add trauma because what the hell were the parents doing? This person was like the epitome of being at rock bottom in their life, and their parents didn't do much to help their child. This case overall is just very strange, and it doesn't help that the media did a poor job at really covering it without making the whole thing about Aiden being transgender.
A teenager accused in a deadly Georgia high school shooting in 2024 changed his plea to guilty today. Colt Gray pleaded guilty to all 55 counts against him in connection with the massacre at Appalachia High School.
Colt Gray was a 14-year-old guy who lived with his parents and had a tumultuous home life. Despite having numerous reports made to CPS and the police department, nothing much was done about the abuse Colt was facing at home. There's a lot of instances of his parents physically abusing him and abusing themselves with drugs. It was bad enough that Colt started making searches relating to wanting to kill his own father. He was placed back and forth between his parents, and it was his grandmother who was making the reports of abuse against them. Colt was talking about committing a school shooting on Discord, and the FBI was made aware of this. His username was a reference to Adam Lanza. When he was confronted by the police, he said that he didn't recognize the email used and said he was getting consistently hacked on Discord, so he hadn't used it in a while. This was dropped, and the FBI said later on, after the shooting, that they didn't have probable cause for arresting him at the time. Even though Colt had skipped all of 8th grade, he was able to attend high school the next school year. The Christmas of 2023, Colt's father gave him a rifle, and this would be the rifle used for the school shooting. His grandmother was very concerned for him because he had mentioned homicidal and suicidal thoughts. He also refused to go to school because he thought the teachers were speaking ill of him. He also had a shrine full of school shooting-related photos in newspapers and Nikolas Cruz in particular. With things being increasingly worrisome, his grandmother told his father to admit Colt to a mental health facility. Of course, this didn't happen, and the many lapses in taking action caught up to everyone. On September 4th, 2024, a call was made threatening to shoot up 5 different schools, but no one knows to this day who this was. Colt asks his first period teacher what the protocol would be if there was a school shooting, and apparently the teacher noticed his backpack seemed to be unusually heavy. They emailed others about this, but his second period teacher didn't receive it. Colt texts his father, "I'm sorry, it's not your fault. You're not to blame for any of it." This alarms his family, and they proceed to contact the school counselor, asking to check up on him. And the counselor mentions Colt talking about school shootings earlier that morning in first period. He texts his mom, "I'm sorry." He goes back to his second period class and fails to enter because one of the students saw he had a gun. He goes next door and starts shooting at a different classroom. He continues looking for classrooms with open doors and shoots at anyone he sees. Eventually, the police and school resource officers arrive and Colt decides to surrender. In total, he shot and killed 4 people and injured 9. He hasn't been convicted yet, but he's facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. His father is actually facing legal consequences as well, for involuntary manslaughter and second-degree murder, though he hasn't been sentenced yet. As I was working on this video, July 30th of 2026, he has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. We can see in the more recent years that now the parents are being held accountable, which is honestly something that should have been happening. We can see here that Colt had a traumatic childhood, he was dealing with mental health issues, he was suicidal, and he obviously resonated with previous school shooters. We're close to done with this part of the video, and I'm sure you can clearly see that this issue about school shooters isn't a mystery.
Right now at noon, we're getting reports of an active shooter on the campus of Florida State University. This is a live look in Tallahassee, Florida, where you can see that there is a heavy police presence.
Phoenix Eichner was a 20-year-old man who had a developmental disability. He was originally born in Norway until he and his mother moved to Florida when he was 10. However, this was under a false pretense. His mother had told his father they were only going to be there for spring break, but once Phoenix had called his father about what was really going on. His father called the police in Florida, but this didn't result in an Amber Alert, and the mother tried to sue for slander. His parents often fought about custody and made claims against each other relating to domestic abuse. This feud between them only ended when Phoenix became an adult and custody was no longer a discussion to be had. When he was 6 years old, he had to repeat kindergarten, but afterwards, he didn't struggle with his academics. In fact, he took advanced classes and was considered to be very smart. It's said that he was bullied and had issues with any woman who tried to tell him what to do, leading to him saying sexist things. He wasn't really liked by a lot of people because they found him to be annoying and weird. People also said that he was homophobic and racist, so that likely was another reason why he wasn't liked. Towards the time of the shooting, he expressed a lot of far-right political beliefs and engaged in hate groups online. Prior to the shooting, he was also asking ChatGPT a lot of questions about school shootings, like how the media would cover a school shooting and details about the best gun to use. Florida is trying to sue OpenAI for this and said that ChatGPT wasn't safe for children too. On April 17th, 2025, Phoenix took his deputy stepmother's Glock and went to his University Florida State and started shooting at students inside the bookstore there. People start running and the activate shooter alarm goes off. There were actually a couple people there who had survived the Parkland High School shooting and were shocked that it was happening again. The police arrive shortly after the alarm goes off and they shoot Phoenix in the jaw and bring him into custody. In total, he shot and killed 2 people and injured 7. Florida is seeking the death penalty, but they haven't been able to get the trial going since Phoenix's lawyer abandoned the case due to a conflict of interest. In this case, it feels like both the parents and the state failed to give Phoenix what he needed during his childhood. His parents were focused on arguing with each other, and I'm surprised there wasn't an Amber Alert for Phoenix when he was 10. I'm unsure of why that was the case. Phoenix deals with having a disability, but his home life being chaotic would more than likely lead to him developing some kind of mental illness. He did have an extreme ideology, again, a loser being obsessed with Adolf Hitler. Meanwhile, Hitler would gas this guy for being disabled, but I digress. I can assume that him being bullied and isolated when he was younger led to him wanting to take vengeance against society. Indicated by the kind of questions he was asking ChatGPT, he wanted to gain infamy for this shooting. I think maybe ChatGPT should made an alert to the authorities, but we've already seen how the authorities could get involved before a shooting happens, and they still fail to prevent the predictable.
Tears and hugs, an all too familiar scene in America after yet another school shooting. Parents racing to check on their children.
Robin Westman was a 23-year-old woman who had a seemingly normal home life and was made to attend church when they were younger. After the shooting, one of their old classmates said that in middle school, Robin was obsessed with Adolf Hitler and mass shootings. The investigation shows that Robin had been depressed, suicidal, and homicidal since they were in middle school. In the later years, Robin would discover that they're trans, but also that dealing with gender dysphoria is mentally taxing. They changed their name to Robin in 2019, but they never engaged with hormones or tried gender-affirming care. They posted videos on YouTube expressing their hatred for Catholics, Jews, and Donald Trump. As you can guess, the coverage for this case turned more into the perpetrator being transgender, rather than, hey, maybe no one should be shooting at children. I think the parents were AFK again for this case, since I don't see much about their home life, so that probably explains why this person is so fucked up. On August 27, 2025, Robin goes to their old elementary middle school, Annunciation Catholic School Church, and enters mass with a rifle and starts shooting at the children. Everyone scrambled to hide behind the pews, and the buddy system the school set up had led to older children getting shot. Robin only shoots at everyone for a couple minutes before leaving and committing suicide outside. In total, she shot and killed 2 kids and injured 28. The numbers are awful, of course, but it's quite lucky that so few children died compared to how many were shot at. So, this person was mentally ill, suicidal, resonated with school shooters, and had an extreme ideology. Unfortunately, as of now, I have no idea what went on at home, and Robin mainly spoke in manifesto, so we can't get much information from the source itself about what the hell was going on at home. I almost want to add infamy because of how grandiose this person acts and how clearly deprived of attention they are. I mean, fuck's sake, the parents of the perpetrator aren't even giving the public their attention.
And in San Diego, authorities are investigating a possible hate crime at a mosque. 3 people were killed after a shooting at the Islamic Center of San Diego. Police say the 2 teenage suspects were also found dead inside a car nearby.
Kane Clark and Caleb Vasquez, who were 17 and 18 years old, actually met online and planned the attack together. Kane attended high school online in iHigh Virtual Academy. The first 3 years of high school, he was on the James Madison High School wrestling team. His family had a good reputation, and it didn't seem like anything was really wrong. Kane actually wrote about how before doing online school, he was bullied a lot and never had a girlfriend. Typically, his accounts online are riddled with school shooting stuff and pro-Nazi nonsense. He identified himself as a Christian eco-fascist accelerationist, which means he cares about the environment, but he's a fascist who believes in speeding up the collapse of our society so we can rebuild it, likely leaning towards his white supremacist ideology. Also, I wanted to read this sentence out loud for you guys, and a picture of a younger Clark with a computer-generated blonde wig and the mythical Aryan world of Agartha in the background. Let's continue. Caleb Vasquez's family says he had autism and they had made multiple attempts to get him psychiatric treatment. But it wasn't enough to help him or steer him away from extreme ideologies. His family did have a lot of guns in the home, but as his mental health declined, they thought it was best to remove them all from the home. This was a very necessary move as he was 5150'd in 2025 and had numerous wellness checks due to his behavior. On May 18th, 2026 at 9:42 a.m., a call comes in from Kane's mom to the police about her son being missing, suicidal, and leaving with his online friend with a gun that was in the home. At first, the police thought this was just a runaway case. She calls again about an hour later and she discovered a suicide note and his computer being full of neo-Nazi ramblings. The police start to investigate this as a potential act of violence about to occur and run Kane's license plate to monitor him. Sometime around 11:42 a.m., Kane and Caleb start shooting at people in the Islamic Center of San Diego, and an injured security guard reports it to the police. This sends everything into lockdown, and the students and staff are made aware of what's going on. The police arrive in minutes, but the duo are already making their way to Kane's car and attempting a drive-by shooting in the surrounding area. This was short-lived as they were found 500 yards away from where they started and had shot themselves. In total, excluding themselves, they shot and killed 3 people and injured 1. After death, it was discovered that they actually briefly live-streamed the shooting on a messaging service, and there were a few viewers. One of them is suspected of being Caleb's online girlfriend. Also, a 75-page manifesto Kane and Caleb wrote was found online, and as you can guess, it spewed a bunch of neo-Nazi nonsense and some anti-Donald Trump statements. They were not only inspired by previous mass shooters, including Columbine, but they actually encouraged more copycat shootings. It's been mentioned quite a bit in this video that these shooters have dangerous ideologies that was a factor in leading them to commit a mass shooting. But I want to state 2 things before any assumptions are made. First off, in the cases of school shootings that I've looked at and didn't include in this video, I would say most of the perpetrators aren't being influenced by neo-Nazism or whatever other nonsense ideology. Second off, even though I say that ideological-esque shootings aren't as common, I have been seeing it a lot more in the recent years, suggesting that there indeed is a rise in people who have these beliefs, becoming more outwardly violent. Even the black girl lover was an Islamophobic freak. I wanted to make my observations clear to steer away from fear-mongering, but to also be honest about what I'm seeing, even if it pisses people off. That being said, we can see suicidal ideation, mental illness, extreme ideology, resonance, vengeance against everyone. And I'll add rage due to them going out of their way to encourage more shootings and make a long-ass manifesto that could have been summed up in a single sentence. Before we finally stop talking about individual cases, I wanted to point out something quite troubling. When it comes to mass shootings happening at a school, I have noticed that between the years 1927 and 1999, there were 12 cases of school massacres in the U.S. in the span of 72 years. After 1999, though, between the years 2001 and 2026, there have been 21 cases of school massacres in the span of 25 years. That's almost double the shootings in a third of the time. I'll get back to this point later on. But let's think about how gun laws were way more loose decades ago, but even with stricter laws, we still have seen a major increase in school shootings. The last case we just covered was in California, aka Gun Control Central. That should make you very worried. The media have twisted the story of Columbine in many ways, and to this day we see how it's still subtly glorified, feeding into this idea that their motive was unknowable and never to be understood, while simultaneously destroying the rest of the basement tapes, where they explain their motive in an effort to curb copycat shootings. The copycats resonate with Eric and Dylan, but they also wanted their level of infamy. The headlines, the social media buzz, and the new wave of school shooter fanatics coming to praise and uphold legacies based on the bodies of others. In the case of Columbine, the media at the time blamed multiple things for what they did, including video games, guns, bullying, Nazism, antidepressants, the internet, homosexuality. Oh wait, the whole thing was actually fake and was just used to make more gun control laws. Alex Jones says it's a false flag, therefore it is. Dylan's mom was Jewish, which means insert anti-Semitic thing here. Marilyn Manson, rock music, goths, and probably other shit I don't know about. We went over the case and saw it's not as mysterious or cold-blooded as it seems from media portrayal. The FBI themselves, acting like Eric, was this super cold and calculated psychopath instead of an emotionally wrecked and angry loser. He and Dylan try to act like there was nothing anyone could have done to stop them, but this was years in the making. and you hear them declare this just as they're about to commit the shooting. Well, duh, no one can stop this now because it's reached the point of no return. But beforehand, a lot of things had to slide by in order for Eric and Dylan to not get caught on their plan. They and other school shooters try to act like this is an act of trying to stand up to their oppressors. Those rich kids, those jocks, those women who get male attention without effort, and those who seem to be born into society without hardship, this twisted message and perception of punching up is the reason why Columbine resonates with anyone who feels oppressed by others, or feels like a loser, or feels like society was against them the moment they were born. Despite Eric and Dylan spewing racial and homophobic slurs themselves, their fans, I hate saying that, feel like they get it. They are the king of losers, and if you simply feel helpless or feel powerless, you can easily justify how you treat those who you feel are oppressing you. In life, you could be getting mistreated by only one person, but if that person isn't punished by the system, let's say school, you begin to feel as if it's not one person who's against you, but an entire society. And there's a lot of truth in that. The worst of the worst can get away scot-free while the rest of us are made to abide by the rules, or laws, if you will. I think the rest of the basement tapes were destroyed because Eric and Dylan used a kernel of the truth and turned it into a cornfield of homicidal nonsense. They wanted to start a revolution full of people like themselves, rebelling against those who wronged them and mistreated them. This was a call to action. But Mitra, why wouldn't all of the basement tapes be destroyed? Aren't these enough to inspire others to do the same? Someone who had access to some of the tapes went on to write that article about them back in December 1999. The police didn't actually want them to talk about what was detailed in the tapes, but of course it was too late. I see this as a leak of information we weren't supposed to have access to. But thank God we do, because this gives us enough information we need to understand their motive. These two were nihilistic, but also had some sort of God complex. Choosing who lives or dies grants them the power and autonomy they feel they've been lacking in their lives. Dylan's mother knew him as a sweet young boy, but what she failed to realize is there's a difference between being harmless and being capable of harm but choosing not to act on it. I've noticed whenever an insecure man in general gets just a taste of power, they abuse it. A lot of men like that haven't done any harm, not because they don't want to, but it's because they don't have the means yet. The means would be guns to weapons and positions of power. Inadequacy induces a lot of feelings of shame that can be unbearable to the point where men like that strive to take power over people in whatever way necessary. Guns close the gap between the physicality of two people, which is why you see those big fat guys drive big trucks with big guns. Now, I mentioned nihilism, and we've noticed that a lot of these school shooters either hate God or are godless. I believe godlessness and atheism are different. These people simply don't believe in a God. They instead believe that hopelessness is a fact of life. They equate God to hope. The issues with authority thing I mentioned in the Rosemar case is also something I see in these other school shooting cases. The hatred of parents, the police, and of course God. I see that these people fall so deep into despair and hopelessness that the copycats deify Eric and Dylan as martyrs and wish to join in this pseudo-religion and die for their cause. It's hopelessness, but with a new sense of purpose and direction. None of these people had much purpose in life, and those who can't create, destroy. I wanted to touch on a misconception about antidepressants. If you're depressed and suicidal for a while, antidepressants can give you more energy, which could lead to you killing yourself. Not because of the medication, but because it makes you more capable of taking action, generally speaking. People give a lot of flack to antidepressants, but we've seen in these cases that they actually did help. It was when these perpetrators stopped taking them that people fell back into their old habits and then did the inevitable. Adam Lanza had a poor reaction, but that could have been the specific medication they used. Or he had a rare disorder, akathisia, that can be activated as a side effect of the medication he was using. When intervention is taken in regard to the mental health of these perpetrators, it fucking works. But these people needed long-term care. Not just, oh, take this for a few months, you'll be good as new when you lean off of them. My biggest gripe with how people approach the issue of school shootings is that they tend to treat the symptoms instead of the root cause. I said that insecure men take any grab at power that they can, and that's true. Guns, especially rifles, can cause a lot more deaths and injuries. The same could be said for bombs. However, what we should focus on is not just stopping someone from getting their hands on a weapon. We should think to ourselves, hey, wait, what if we dealt with the insecure men? Focusing on mental health is good. However, the way we do it in America is about money and efficiency. Long-term care? Uh-oh, that's a lot of money. We'll just wait until you hurt yourself or someone else to finally do something. Everyone screams mental health, but no one utters if it's even up to standard. Take this so you won't feel sad anymore. Oh, great. It's working, but your insurance isn't. Let's give our thoughts and prayers to the children in advance. Oh, home life is fucking awful? Oh, don't worry. CPS is notoriously amazing at helping children. You get what I'm saying? There's no good adjustments being made within an individual's life. It's literally just don't feel that way, even though anyone in your position would hang themselves. If anyone gives a single damn about preventing school shootings, we need to accept the truth these perpetrators are grappling with. Steer them away from the whole homicidal thing, but lean into their concerns about their own lives. Insecure men are usually dealing with something. It's no excuse, of course, but failing to develop any level of confidence in yourself or something to keep you going leaves men like that with nothing to lose, and those are the most dangerous men. Also, I want to add that I think the reason why a lot of these shooters don't kill as many people as they say they will is because of overconfidence, and also the fact that they're chasing a feeling, not an actual objective goal, even if they stated so. They wanted to feel power over people, and the moment you shoot someone, you get that feeling without needing to kill tens of people. The Virginia Tech case sticks out because he was solely focused on killing people all the way through, not letting him or his nerves get in the way of that. He already felt very disconnected from people, generally speaking, and I think him being schizotypal is a huge factor in that.
Joining me now, Stephen King. One thing I've always wanted to know, do you scare yourself when you're writing these books?
Once in a while.
Rage by Stephen King is basically like a somewhat shittier version of The Breakfast Club, but in the context of a school shooting. This book came out in 1977, and the protagonist's name is Charlie Decker. We learn that he's become more of a troublemaker recently, and he had struck his chemistry teacher with a pipe wrench. He meets with the principal, and he argues until he's promptly expelled. He's angry, and he takes his dad's handgun and kind of shoots up the school. He shoots and kills 2 teachers and holds his classmates hostage for a few hours. During this, almost all of them have their little Breakfast Club moment of telling each other vulnerable stories about themselves, and Charlie reveals himself as well. The only person who refuses to participate in this lunacy is Ted Jones. He's basically seen as the most popular guy at school, and Charlie hates him. Everyone in the story divulges that they have been through traumatic things, and this space they created becomes an opportunity to confess to one another about their personal lives and how they struggle with it. Ted somewhat does this, but more so against his will, since others are spilling his secrets. Everyone else is in therapy la la land, and Ted is the only one understanding the severity of the situation and remaining in reality. If this book was from Ted's perspective, it would match the absurdity of Camus' work. At the end, everyone in the classroom turns on Ted and traumatizes him to the point of catatonia, and Charlie is shot and arrested. You can probably already see why 4 different shootings were connected to this book in some way. And yes, it was 4 until Stephen King finally played the hero and stopped printing it. I mock him in this book because it's not very good, and if you have an ounce of media literacy, you see that Ted's character is completely distorted through Charlie's lens, aka he's an unreliable narrator. Stephen wrote this back in high school, so I'm not totally shocked that he's using Charlie to express his darker thoughts. Also, there were sexual scenes involving teenagers in this book, and that's really a Stephen King classic because he did the same shit in it. Enough about the book and its weird-ass author. I think the biggest takeaway I got from this book was 2 things. First, a lot of perpetrators who go on to commit school shootings are really bad at expressing how they feel emotionally. Stephen creates an extreme scenario where vulnerability is somewhat forced in the group of teens, and they get to relate to each other freely without too much judgment. That's what I mean by therapy la la land. Second, everyone turns on Ted because he's like those jocks Eric and Dylan hated. He's like those rich kids Cho hated. He's basically the amalgamation of everything losers or insecure people hate. Seemingly perfect guy, perfect life. But Stephen slips up in revealing that Ted's life also had traumatic events in it. I call it a slip because instead of showing he's flawed, he's actually showing that Ted went through awful things like Charlie but never became like him. And Charlie attributes this to Ted just being cold-blooded basically, instead of coming to the conclusion that Ted didn't decide to take his shit out on innocent people. You see how Charlie is relatable to the perpetrators? How the students are relatable to those who sympathize with shooters and even glorify them? And how Ted is relatable to those who aren't completely out of their fucking minds. Even if Ted isn't a perfect person, no one in that classroom is either. He's attacked because he's perceived better than them. It's not as if everyone in the school knew the classmates' secrets. They hid their home lives too. Thinking that jocks or rich kids having difficulties at home is some sort of gotcha to them is incredibly dehumanizing. Ted didn't put himself on a pedestal, everyone else did, and now he's being punished because he made others insecure just by existing. There are a lot of people who are jocks or rich who do bully and torment others, but clearly, we've seen how wimpy or broke people do the same thing. You see how letting the circumstances of your life define how you feel about yourself is dangerous to yourself and others? Who cares if you're broke, weak, or single? First of all, those things can change. Second of all, those things don't define who you are. Too often people face adversity and turn that into their identity, instead of recognizing it as their current circumstance that doesn't change or inform who they are. When people place negative labels on themselves and portray themselves to be eternal victims, any negative action they take towards others is going to be seen as punching up. It's a victim mentality. It didn't matter what circumstances these perpetrators were dealing with, they felt like they were fighting back against whoever turned their life sour. The Covenant case was literally about a rich white trans dude who felt entitled to have sex with black women who weren't interested in him. See how twisted perception can be when you're dealing with suicidal ideation, mental illness, and a persecution complex?
Will you welcome, please, an incredibly prolific man, Mr. Anthony Burgess.
I know in these sections of the video I'm touching on multiple topics, but I think it's necessary for the sake of getting my point across and making things as clear as possible so there isn't any confusion for anyone watching. A Clockwork Orange is a book about a 15-year-old kid going around and doing a bunch of heinous shit. He kills an old lady and he's sent to prison. He stays there a little while, but he accidentally kills a cellmate, and the prison warden is trying to figure out what to do about him. The government has a new program where, for 2 weeks, you essentially get brainwashed into never harming someone again. Alex, yes, I forgot to mention the protagonist's name, sees this as a great and fast way to get out of prison. He unknowingly just signed up for CIA-level torture, and they brainwash him into feeling sick whenever he thinks or tries to do anything to harm someone. He's all mentally fucked up after leaving prison, and his old friends are now police officers, and they take him to the woods and beat the shit out of him. Obviously, I'm skipping a lot of details, but basically, he runs into this group of people who are against what happened to him, and they convince him to help their cause. They too torture him emotionally until he tries to kill himself by jumping out a window. He wakes up in the hospital, and he's actually cured of the brainwashing and goes back to being a shithead. The movie ends with that, but the final chapter of the book reveals the entire point of the novel. He runs into an old friend and sees he's married and has changed his ways. Alex at this point was growing bored of his criminal lifestyle, and he starts imagining how nice it'd be to have a normal life and get married. In the end, he chooses to change. The author Anthony Burgess defines a clockwork orange. When a man ceases to have free will, he is no longer a man. Just a clockwork orange, a shiny, appealing object, but just a toy to be wound up by either God or the devil, or what is increasingly replacing both, the state. Basically, a person who is solely capable of good or evil, losing a crucial aspect of humanity, which is free will. I bring this up because we see all of these perpetrators choose to be clockwork oranges. I'd argue that people every day choose this as well. Actually, I'd argue more that the media wants to convince others, and itself, that some people are simply pure evil. The movie A Clockwork Orange was based on the American version of the book, which excluded the last chapter because a publisher told Anthony something along the lines of, "It'll sell better" or something. Forgive me for misremembering if I did. The publisher and the movie feed into this obsession we have in the States about cold-bloodedness and people's incapability of changing. Certain tragedies were just bound to happen in the sense that it's no one's fault except for the perpetrators. You can't blame the society we live in for breeding monsters. We're all innocent. This black and white, painfully inaccurate way of thinking permeates our media, especially true crime content. It's gotten so bad that now whenever someone does something awful, people blame the parents. There's truth in it, but to put all the blame on the parents is reductionist and strips the nuance away from these true crime cases. Balance is needed. We've seen many cases of abuse and have seen many mistakes made by parents, but we've also seen cases here in this video where the parents or someone in the perpetrator's life genuinely did the best they could, hindsight or not. Where does that leave us now? The title of this section is something I want to go back to because we see how the media is dying to make another shitty serial killer Netflix documentary with the newest hot white guy of the week. You must be careful. Jeffrey Dahmer, the creepy son of a bitch, was secretly genius and charming. So many killers are played up to be these high IQ pussy charmers, when the reality is they were off-putting and purposefully targeted vulnerable individuals. Jeffrey Dahmer targeted young gay black men because in the fucking 80s, they were incredibly vulnerable. Eric and Dylan are spoken about as if they're so smart when the reality is their plans could have been foiled by a glance. Eric acts as if he's some sort of master manipulator, but the truth is everyone around these two boys were lying to themselves. Everyone saw some kind of sign that they were going down a bad path in life, but accepting that possibility is a hard thing to do emotionally, so instead, people made excuses or rationalizations. We see the same thing happen in other cases, not including the ones involving neglect, of course. I'm thinking about making a video about the phenomenon of people fooling themselves because the best liars don't convince you. They hope you convince yourself. Regarding the rest of society, there's so many flaws in our mental health systems, our police systems, and our familial systems, and definitely the school system. With all of this glorification of these killers being absolute and devoid of anything human, it's easy to see how if someone's struggling with dark thoughts, they can convince themselves they're a clockwork orange. I talked somewhat about how your beliefs can become your identity if you hold them long enough. In the decap video I made, and this applies here, there's almost a web of what the psychology of a murderer is. And if you've watched my previous 2 true crime videos, you see that even though the cases were completely different, these perpetrators share a lot of similarities in terms of their perception. Also, before I move on, the clockwork orange stuff can be easily applied to how people engage with politics and ideals of moral purity, but maybe that'll be a separate video.
The South Texas town of Uvalde is mourning the deaths of 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School.
I was stumped by this until I went through these cases, and I'm sure some cases are different from the conclusion I'm about to draw, but I think it's widely applicable. The targeting of elementary schools is because young children are easier to hurt, and the media coverage is almost guaranteed. It's more about the shock factor rather than anything else. Also, if you were looking to inflict harm on society, targeting the most defenseless and innocent group of people is the easiest path to send a message, which is completely disgusting, but this should motivate us more to be very protective over small children. They literally only have us to rely on and their underdeveloped survival instincts. The targeting of other levels of school always seems to be related to the perpetrator, like they know people there or have spent a lot of time there.
Faces of tragedy, grief, and disbelief.
We are.
As we learn more tonight about the 7
I've done quite a bit of analysis already, and I'm sure some of you are like, we already know the motives. This part of the video should be 5 seconds long, and I agree. If you've watched through this whole video so far, you likely have a far greater understanding of how these cases come to be and aren't as accepting of narratives about unknowability. Something interesting I've noticed in my research is that a psychologist actually did literally the exact same thing I'm doing right now, but I have some problems with their conclusions. Peter Langman is a psychologist who is an expert on school shootings, and after this video I should be added to that list. Anyways, he has a sample size of 10 cases of school shootings and splits these perpetrators into 3 categories: psychopathic, psychotic, and traumatized. I don't deny his findings. My gripe is his sample size is too small and his way of going about it lacks nuance and crossover. Using my own criteria, we can see that the majority of cases have a cocktail of suicidal ideation, mental illness, and hatred against society and/or feeling persecuted by society. It's a combination of traits that leads to the same or similar outcomes. Also, the traumatized category lacks emotional or mental abuse, which leaves a lot to be desired. There's definitely cases of undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenia being a major factor in the case, but there's also cases of extremist ideologies being a major factor of the case. The thing is, they're secondary to what the big 3 are. They definitely play a role, but the answer to the question of motive isn't one word. It's a blend of what I've uncovered in this video. If you do know anyone struggling with the big 3, for the love of God, try to get them help. Even if they won't hurt others, they will in one way or another hurt themselves. And prevention is my aim for creating these true crime videos. Now, if you yourself are struggling with these things, I have something very important I want to say to you. In the circumstance, you're genuinely unable to curb suicidal or homicidal feelings, and you have some sort of fear of opening up to others about it because you rightfully fear the stigma, my advice is this. You see how all of these shooters spent months or years planning their shootings? Listen, if you have that kind of time on your hands, you should use it to build a better future for yourself. I noticed that a lot of people commit suicide for 2 big reasons. They are unable able to authentically express themselves, and they lack a future worth fighting for. If you really got the ability to go in an elementary school and shoot fucking 6-year-olds, you're more than capable of bearing the burden of freely expressing yourself. If you're surrounded by people who think goth culture is lame or whatever, fuck them. Who cares? Regardless of what people are saying about you, you need to choose your own happiness first and foremost. You don't have to accept how the people around you act or treat you. You deserve a good life. But Mitra, I'm black or I'm gay or I got noodle arms or I'm trans. The world really is against me. Listen, something I've learned with time is your life is about you. For example, if someone like your family or friends or whoever else sexually assaulted you or something, I agree with you. They probably do deserve to die, but you deserve a good life. I picked on all of these perpetrators in this video, but that doesn't mean I'm not coming from a place of empathy or understanding. I, myself, fell into the alt-right pipeline back when I was 16. I can't tell you how riddled I was with self-hate and suicidal thoughts. These political freaks and these social media bastards will validate your experiences without actually improving them. They too try to treat your symptoms without looking at the root cause of your problems. The same thing goes on the left side of the political spectrum. You're toyed with back and forth so these people can further their political causes and make money off of your misery. You can likely tell that I'm a leftist, but even then, a lot of leftists don't always seek understanding or realistic ideas of improvement. What I'm saying is, even though you're right about a lot of the awfulness about the world, that doesn't mean you need to participate in it or take vengeance and leave yourself, still without the happiness you desperately ache for. Focus on expressing yourself in any way you can that's safe enough for you. Focus on your health, like working out or improving your diet. Maybe read A Clockwork Orange or another one of those classics you hear about. I hated reading until I engaged with it freely outside an academic environment. Focus on your mental health and try to understand yourself without thinking you're just a clockwork orange. You can do wrong and try to do right. You can have a past of doing right and still make mistakes in the present. You must live for yourself. If that's difficult right now, try to find something small that you like to keep you going. I was on that crazy femcel shit when I was younger, and now I'm the Chad I thought I could never be. This isn't about shaming yourself into change or consistency. It's about literally allowing yourself to be human and giving yourself grace. Take note of your environment, acknowledge your limits, but don't define yourself by your circumstances. Who the hell convinced you you don't deserve better? That's not to say you gotta go on a fuck you campaign to every person who wronged you. It's your life. You are the focus, not them or their bullshit. I wanted to put this in the video because I feel like I'm proof that things do get better. I've never been so consistent in my life when it came to self-care, but what finally helped me was posting the music I've been postponing. What also has helped me with understanding the world around me is The Plague by Albert Camus. There's a lot of times in your life where bad shit happens, and it's nothing to do with you. It's not your fault. Total and complete hopelessness is as delusional as toxic positivity. People hardly speak on toxic negativity because somehow negative things feel more real when that's not the case. It's also worth mentioning that you should question your own perception from time to time. If you deal with depression, it's more than possible that you could be like Dylan, thinking that no one cares about you when the opposite is true. I really hope that my words have helped someone out there or helped someone else understand what someone could be going through and how their minds can warp reality into something unbelievable. We're finally at the conclusion, which is just the end of the video at this point, because I feel like the last section was more of a proper conclusion. This video has led me to do a lot of research into this subject and staring into the abyss. When the abyss stares back at you, you see the reflection and think it's you, but that's not true. You are not just darkness or just light. Not only are you a mixture, but you do have the choice to choose. Disregard religion entirely if you need to. You can't let what other people say be your reference for who you are and what you should believe in. I likely missed a lot of details or forgot to touch on certain things in this video due to how long it is, and this being my first time making something so big. I'm open to criticism, of course, and I'm willing to refine certain points I've made, but please don't comment anything obvious like, women can be school shooters too. Like, yeah, bud, I know, but the majority of them are men, so I directed a lot of my analysis towards them. Besides, I'm sure everything I said can apply to women as well. I did my best to have accurate information for these cases because part of what took me a little while to finish this video is noticing inaccuracies or important information just being left out. Give me some grace if I fall short on certain things. Also, this video has taught me the hard lesson of not having too much faith in Wikipedia. Like, yeah, I was taught that in school, but damn, I thought I was gonna go Adam Lanza mode and fucking edit a bunch of those pages. You're here at the very end of the video and likely was curious about the video notes I made throughout, about me offering my content creation services publicly. During the making of this video, the other laptop I was using completely went to shit on me, and I wasn't able to get it repaired without basically needing to just get a new laptop. You can rightly assume that was a major hit on me financially. I've made a Patreon, a Ko-Fi, and a Fivver account. You can simply support me if you want to, or instead commission me for editing work, script writing, and turning your voice into text-to-speech for your own videos. I don't have a consistent place to record audio, and it became a much bigger issue over the course of me working on this video, so I had to resort to using my own voice and turning it into TTS. That was the audio change I noted earlier in the video. It was likely noticeable at some points that this voice sounds off sometimes. My hand was forced on this. I wouldn't have been able to finish the video otherwise. When I say I'll turn your voice into text-to-speech, the service I'm offering is vocal cleanup. I'm not exactly selling you the software itself. You can go and get it yourself if you like, but be warned because it's iffy, and working with it on this very long video was quite hard. If you'd like to, please like and subscribe to the channel. I want to make more content and remixes, and I don't want to be stopped by technical difficulties or anything. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because I'm definitely not making another 3-hour video again for a very long time. I'll stick to shorter videos for the sake of my own mental health. I'd like the next video to be more lighthearted because having to go through so many cases, not even including the ones that didn't make it into the video, was very exhausting and a lot of work. Honestly, this is probably the only video anyone would need to watch about school shootings. The comprehensiveness of this video was by complete accident. Alright, I hope everyone has a good day. See ya.